This is a compilation of over 3 hours of Star Wars plot holes and mysteries. Explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with Star Wars' biggest mysteries explained. Star Wars accidentally created the most controversial prophecy in sci-fi history. Every Jedi Council meeting, every Force vision, every desperate hope from the prequels to the sequels revolved around one question nobody can definitively answer. That's why today, I'm breaking down every single one of Star Wars' biggest unsolved mysteries and everything we know about them, starting with the prophecy that George Lucas himself can't seem to keep straight, the Chosen One. The Chosen One prophecy is either the backbone of the entire Skywalker saga or the biggest retcon disaster in franchise history. Here's the thing. The prophecy states that a being born of no father would bring balance to the Force and destroy the Sith. Anakin Skywalker fit every single requirement. Conceived by midi-chlorians themselves with a count exceeding 20,000 per cell, higher than Yoda, George Lucas explicitly confirmed Anakin was the Chosen One and fulfilled his destiny by killing Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. Case closed, except the Rise of Skywalker obliterated that entire conclusion. Palpatine's return means Anakin's sacrifice didn't permanently destroy the Sith after all. The novel Master and Apprentice reveals the exact wording, "Through him will ultimate balance in the Force be restored." That phrase, "through him," suddenly opens interpretation to include his descendants, potentially Rey herself. But if the prophecy required 3 generations of Skywalkers plus a Palpatine granddaughter to fulfill, was the entire Jedi Order interpreting it wrong for 1,000 years? And that's not the only contradiction. In Rebels, Obi-Wan tells dying Maul that Luke, not Anakin, is the Chosen One. Dave Filoni has explained balance as the Force's natural state being light, with darkness representing corruption. But that interpretation doesn't explain why killing one Sith Lord would restore cosmic equilibrium when Darksiders existed for millennia before Palpatine. The worst part? Yoda's warning in Revenge of the Sith haunts everything, a prophecy that misread could have been. That single line suggests the Jedi might have been chasing the wrong interpretation from the beginning. Some fans theorize the entire Skywalker bloodline collectively fulfills the prophecy. Others believe balance was only ever temporary before the Force's cyclical nature reset everything. Nobody knows which answer is correct because Lucas and Disney have given contradictory explanations for 2 decades. But if you think one broken prophecy is confusing, wait until you hear how the franchise's main villain somehow survived a reactor shaft explosion with 0 explanation. Palpatine's return. Somehow, Palpatine returned became the most mocked line in Star Wars history the second it left Poe Dameron's mouth in The Rise of Skywalker. And here's where it gets worse. 5 years later, despite novelizations, comics, and multiple Disney Plus series desperately attempting to fill the gap, the core mechanism of how Palpatine actually survived remains frustratingly vague. Like, embarrassingly vague. What canon establishes is this. Palpatine used something called essence transfer, a technique he learned from Darth Plagueis, to move his consciousness into a clone body on Exegol. The Sith Eternal cult maintained his failing form. The Mandalorian Season 3 introduced Project Necromancer, a Shadow Council initiative involving Dr. Pershing's cloning research and Force-sensitive blood. The Bad Batch Season 3 spent an entire season exploring Mount Tantiss facilities, conducting experiments on M-count transfers. Darth Vader comics show Palpatine visiting Exegol and overseeing early Final Order construction during the original trilogy era, meaning he planned this decades in advance. Cool. But none of that answers the actual question. How did his consciousness survive the Death Star 2 reactor explosion and the station's subsequent destruction in the vacuum of space? When exactly did essence transfer occur? Before, during, or after his physical death? How did a clone body conveniently exist on Exegol, ready to receive him at the exact moment he needed it? 0 answers exist in any official source. J.J. Abrams acknowledged the film lacked time to properly explain, telling Uproxx that Palpatine's return felt almost inevitable given the saga structure. But inevitability doesn't equal explanation. That's like saying Thanos coming back was inevitable, so we don't need to show how. The most popular fan theory connects his survival to the world between worlds, that dimension existing outside time, which Palpatine desperately sought access to in Rebels. If he entered the world between worlds at the moment of death, he could theoretically exit at any point in space and time. The theory makes perfect sense, except it's never been confirmed or denied by anyone at Lucasfilm, so we're left with somehow as the official explanation for the franchise's main villain returning from death in the final film of a 9-movie saga. But at least Palpatine's resurrection got some half-hearted explanation attempts, unlike the Jedi Master who fell out a window and might still be walking around Coruscant 20 years later. Mace Windu. Mace Windu is either dead in a Coruscant gutter or secretly the most patient Jedi in galactic history. Before you dismiss this as wishful thinking, hear me out. In Revenge of the Sith, Windu had his hand severed by Anakin, took Palpatine's Force lightning directly to the face, and fell from a Coruscant high-rise window. The camera follows him down, screaming, tumbling through traffic lanes. But we never see him hit the ground. We never see a body. And in Star Wars, no body means no death. Samuel L. Jackson has actively campaigned for Windu's survival for nearly 2 decades. He told Entertainment Weekly, and I quote, "Jedi can fall from amazing distances, and there's a long history of one-handed Jedi, so why not?" More significantly, Jackson claimed George Lucas himself signed off on the whole thing regarding survival scenarios. That's not a fan theory. That's the actor saying the creator approved it. And the precedent is overwhelming. Darth Maul was literally bisected at the waist and thrown down a reactor shaft on Naboo. He survived through pure rage and lived for decades. Luke Skywalker fell from Cloud City after losing his hand, plummeted through multiple levels of infrastructure, and got rescued by a convenient antenna. Palpatine survived a reactor shaft explosion and the Death Star 2's destruction in the vacuum of space. Every single one of those scenarios is objectively worse than Windu's fall. But here's where it gets interesting. Concept art for Star Wars Rebels reportedly showed Windu alive, though this was cut from production. In The Rise of Skywalker, Windu's voice appears among the dead Jedi speaking to Rey during her final confrontation. Except living Jedi like Ahsoka can also communicate through the Force, so that doesn't confirm anything. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series revealed someone saved Grogu from the Jedi Temple massacre during Order 66. Fans immediately theorized Windu. The problem is his absence. If Windu survived, where was he during the original trilogy when the galaxy desperately needed Jedi? Hiding in the unknown regions? Operating secretly through networks like the Hidden Path? Too traumatized to act after watching his entire order burn? Matt Martin of Lucasfilm's Story Group has remained deliberately non-committal on the subject for years, which in Star Wars means absolutely nothing is confirmed until it appears on screen. But at least Mace Windu's fate is a question about one character. Unlike the Sith Lord, whose entire backstory was teased in one speech and then abandoned for 15 years. Darth Plagueis. Darth Plagueis the Wise is the most important character in Star Wars who barely exists. Palpatine's Opera House monologue in Revenge of the Sith created one of the franchise's most iconic mysteries. Plagueis could use the dark side to influence midi-chlorians, create life, and prevent death, powers that directly connect to Anakin's virgin birth and Palpatine's eventual resurrection. Yet canon has only provided tantalizing fragments of his actual story, and now we might never get the full picture. Here's what we know. The Acolyte in 2024 delivered the first live-action Plagueis appearance, confirming he was a Moon who lived approximately 132 years before the Battle of Yavin. The series showed him observing the Stranger and the Force-manipulated twins May and Osha, whose unusual creation involved them sharing identical midi-chlorian symbionts, supposedly impossible. This strongly implied Plagueis had been conducting experiments on life creation for decades, potentially centuries. The series also confirmed his master was Darth Tenebris, and suggested Plagueis operated multiple secret apprentices simultaneously, breaking the rule of 2 long before Palpatine did the same thing. But the Acolyte got cancelled after 1 season. Every single thread it started with Plagueis now hangs indefinitely with 0 resolution coming, which leaves the most important questions completely unanswered. Did Plagueis actually create Anakin Skywalker? The original Lucas explanation was that Palpatine's opera story was partially false, designed to manipulate. But canon Vader comics show the dark side itself, creating Anakin as a response to Plagueis, tampering with life and midi-chlorians. So which is it? Divine Force intervention or Sith science gone wrong? What exact techniques did Plagueis develop that Palpatine later used for his own resurrection? The essence transfer ability clearly came from somewhere. Did Plagueis achieve any form of immortality himself before Palpatine killed him, or did he die permanently while his apprentice figured out how to cheat death afterward? And here's the frustrating part. James Luceno's Darth Plagueis novel from 2012 answered every single one of these questions in excruciating detail. The book is beloved by fans, considered one of the best Star Wars novels ever written, except it's Legends continuity now, non-canon, meaning the definitive account of Plagueis' life, experiments, and relationship with Palpatine doesn't technically exist anymore. So we're left with an opera speech, a brief appearance in a cancelled show, and a bunch of comics hinting at his influence without explaining anything concrete. But if you think one mysterious Sith Lord is frustrating, wait until you hear about the species that's appeared 3 times in 50 years of Star Wars and still has 0 explanation for what they even are. Yoda's species. Yoda lived for 900 years, trained Jedi for 8 centuries, served on the High Council, and died as one of the most powerful Force users in galactic history. And we still don't know what species he is. Not a single source across the entire Star Wars canon has ever named his species, identified their homeworld, or explained their nature. Only 3 members have ever appeared on screen: Yoda, Yaddle, who served on the Jedi Council in The Phantom Menace, and Grogu. George Lucas deliberately kept this secret and reportedly forbade Lucasfilm from revealing any information about it, ever. And that decision makes the mystery exponentially weirder when you look at what little we do know. All 3 known members are extraordinarily Force-sensitive, not just powerful but naturally attuned to the Force in ways no other species demonstrates across thousands of known sentient races. Grogu, at approximately 50 years old during The Mandalorian, is still essentially an infant, speaking only a handful of words and requiring constant care. That suggests a lifespan potentially spanning thousands of years if 50 equals childhood. Their physical characteristics defy normal logic. The species stands barely 2 feet tall with massive eyes, pointed ears, and 3-digit hands. Yet Yoda could lift X-Wing starfighters with his mind, duel Sith Lords in lightsaber combat, and tank Force lightning from Palpatine himself. Their size is completely irrelevant to their capabilities, which shouldn't be possible based on how the Force works with other species. Nobody knows where they come from. The galaxy has been explored for 25,000 years of recorded history. Thousands of species have documented homeworlds, evolutionary paths, and migration patterns. This species? Nothing. 0 planets claim them. 0 archaeological evidence exists. They seemingly appeared in the galaxy fully formed without any origin point anyone can trace. Fan speculation ranges from them being a celestial creation to originating from the same extragalactic location as the Night Sisters, which we now know is Peridea, in another galaxy entirely. Some theorists believe they're so rare because they're literally manifestations of the Force itself. Not a biological species at all, but rather physical embodiments of cosmic energy. Dave Filoni has maintained Lucas's secrecy with Grogu, treating his background with the same deliberate care Lucas used with Yoda. The Mandalorian has had 4 seasons, The Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka, all featuring or referencing Grogu. Not once has anyone even attempted to name his species or explain where he came from beyond the Jedi Temple. The mystery's longevity suggests it may genuinely never be answered. Lucas believed some things in Star Wars should remain unknowable, and current Lucasfilm leadership appears to completely agree, which means 50 years from now, we'll probably still be calling them Yoda's species, with 0 additional information. But at least Yoda's origins are intentionally mysterious, unlike the question of who or what actually caused the entire Skywalker saga to happen in the first place: Anakin's conception. Shmi Skywalker's declaration that there was no father established Anakin's virgin birth as the single most significant miracle in Star Wars, but who or what actually caused his conception remains deliberately ambiguous, and the answer fundamentally changes how we interpret the entire saga. 3 competing explanations exist in canon, and they contradict each other completely. First, Qui-Gon's interpretation. The midi-chlorians themselves spontaneously generated Anakin as the Chosen One. The Force, responding to Sith corruption spreading across the galaxy, created a being of pure light to restore balance. This is the divine intervention explanation, treating Anakin's birth as prophecy made flesh. No individual caused it. The Force itself acted. Second, Palpatine's implication during the opera scene. Darth Plagueis' experiments in creating life through midi-chlorian manipulation directly resulted in Anakin, meaning Palpatine's master is Anakin's de facto father, and the Chosen One is actually an accidental Sith science experiment gone catastrophically wrong. This makes the prophecy a cosmic joke, the Jedi worshipping a being created by the dark side. Third, the Vader comics revelation. The dark side itself created Anakin as a defensive response to Plagueis tampering with the Force. When Plagueis tried to create life, the Force pushed back and generated Anakin as a countermeasure, meaning no single being is responsible, but his conception was still a reaction to Sith interference rather than natural prophecy. George Lucas consistently stated the midi-chlorians created Anakin independently, and that Palpatine's opera story was designed purely to manipulate. The implication that Plagueis caused the virgin birth was meant to be a lie Palpatine used to seduce Anakin. But Lucas also acknowledged planning to explore the microbiotic world of midi-chlorians and the Wills in his unmade sequel trilogy. The Wills are cosmic beings who feed on the Force and record galactic history. Lucas wanted to reveal that midi-chlorians are the link between the macro and micro and that Anakin's creation involved layers of reality beyond what the Jedi understood. That explanation never happened. Disney scrapped those plans entirely, so canon Vader comics filled the gap by showing Palpatine attempting a ritual to create life, only for the vision to show him Anakin's conception on Tatooine as the ritual's consequence. Except the framing is ambiguous enough that it could mean Palpatine caused it, or that the Force showed him what his master's actions triggered, or that the dark side created Anakin specifically to spite the Sith. The messianic parallels are completely intentional. Anakin as a savior figure born of prophecy, tempted by evil, fallen from grace, ultimately redeemed through sacrifice. Whether his conception was divine intervention, Sith science, or the Force's countermeasure, profoundly affects whether his story is tragedy, irony, or cosmic justice. And we genuinely don't know which interpretation is correct, because every official source gives a different answer. But if you think the origin of the Chosen One is confusing, wait until you hear about the 3 literal gods who died in the Clone Wars and somehow still influence everything happening in current Star Wars, the Mortis gods. The father, son, and daughter are either the most important beings in Star Wars history or the weirdest thing the Clone Wars ever did that nobody wants to address. These 3 godlike entities were introduced in the Clone Wars Season 3, and they break every rule the franchise established about the Force. The father embodied balance between light and dark. The daughter represented the light side. The son represented the dark side. Their realm, Mortis, was described as a conduit through which all the Force in the entire galaxy flowed. Not some of it, all of it. And their powers were genuinely terrifying. They could shapeshift into massive creatures, stop lightsaber blades mid-swing with their hands, manipulate time itself, and erase memories at will. The son showed Anakin his entire future as Darth Vader in seconds. The father could neutralize both his children's powers simultaneously. These weren't just strong Force users. They were the Force made flesh. All 3 died during the Mortis arc. The son killed the daughter, the father sacrificed himself to stop the son, and Anakin killed the son with the dagger of Mortis. Done. Finished. Except their influence never stopped. The daughter transferred her life essence to save Ahsoka Tano right before dying, creating a permanent bond represented by the owl Mirai, who follows Ahsoka everywhere. Their images guard the portals to the world between worlds, that dimension existing outside time where Ezra saved Ahsoka from Vader. Ahsoka's entire survival past her duel with Vader is because of the daughter's essence inside her. But here's where it gets genuinely bizarre. In the Ahsoka series, massive statues of the Mortis gods stand on Peridea, a planet in another galaxy entirely, thousands of light years from the known Star Wars galaxy. In the same location as the Night Sisters' original homeworld, 3 enormous statues of dead gods tower over the landscape. Baylan Skoll, the fallen Jedi played by Ray Stevenson, came to Peridea searching for something. He tells his apprentice Shin he's seeking the beginning, something that could end the constant cycle of light and dark, conflict and war that has plagued the galaxy for millennia. The final shot of Ahsoka Season 1 shows Baylan standing on the father's outstretched hand, staring at something in the distance we can't see. What he's looking for is the single biggest active mystery in Star Wars right now. Except Ray Stevenson died before Season 2 could film, meaning we might never get the answer, unless they recast or drastically rewrite the storyline. The statues suggest the Mortis gods have an extragalactic origin, possibly connecting them to the Celestials. The Celestials were ancient beings in Legends continuity who built star systems, created hyperspace routes, and may have literally become the Ones. In Legends, there was a 4th being called the Mother, later named Abeloth. She was imprisoned by the Celestials after becoming corrupted while seeking immortality. She's essentially a Lovecraftian horror entity who can possess multiple bodies simultaneously and corrupt anyone she touches. Whether Abeloth exists in canon is unknown. Whether Baylan believes he can find her, control her, or destroy her is unknown. Whether the statues on Peridea mean the Mortis gods originated there, or simply influenced that galaxy is unknown. Dave Filoni has been building towards something with the world between worlds, Ahsoka's connection to the daughter, and now Baylan's quest. But what that something is remains completely unexplained. The Mortis arc aired in 2011. 14 years later, we still don't know what those 3 beings actually were or why they matter to the larger mythology, but at least the Mortis gods died on screen. Unlike the redeemed Skywalker who sacrificed everything to save Rey and then just vanished without any explanation for why the Force abandoned him. Ben Solo's ghost. Ben Solo achieved redemption, sacrificed his life to save Rey, and the Force just said no to his immortality for absolutely zero explained reason. And this isn't some minor character we're talking about. This is the grandson of Anakin Skywalker, son of Leia Organa and Han Solo, the final Skywalker bloodline member who gave his life in the ultimate selfless act. He deserved a Force ghost. He earned a Force ghost. He got nothing. Here's why this breaks everything. The rules for Force ghosts seemed clearly established. The technique requires specific training. Qui-Gon Jinn learned it from the Force priestesses on a remote planet, then taught Yoda and Obi-Wan after his death. You have to consciously learn how to preserve your consciousness in the Force. Without training, you just die and become one with the Force permanently. Except Anakin Skywalker never received this training. He spent 20 years as Darth Vader committing galaxy-wide atrocities, turned back to the light in his final moments, and immediately appeared as a Force ghost alongside Obi-Wan and Yoda on Endor in Return of the Jedi. The common explanation is that Anakin's status as the Chosen One granted automatic transcendence, or that Obi-Wan's spirit guided him at the moment of death, or that his redemption was so complete the Force itself made an exception. Cool. So precedent exists for untrained Force users becoming ghosts through redemption alone. Ben Solo had every single qualification. Selfless sacrifice? Check. He literally gave his life force to resurrect Rey. Redemption? Check. He renounced the dark side, killed the Knights of Ren, and helped destroy Palpatine. Powerful Force lineage? Check. Grandson of the Chosen One, son of a future Force ghost, connected to Rey through a Force dyad, which the ancient Sith called a power like life itself. He also had Anakin as his grandfather, and Leia, who became a Force ghost, as his mother to potentially guide him at the moment of death, exactly like Obi-Wan theoretically did for Anakin. Yet, The Rise of Skywalker shows Rey sensing Ben's death through their bond, seeing his body fade away and absolutely nothing afterward. No Force ghost appeared to her. No spiritual presence lingered. Rey takes the Skywalker name at the end, sees Force ghosts of Luke and Leia watching over her, and Ben is just absent, gone, erased. The novel Shadow of the Sith hints that Palpatine had techniques for trapping spirits and preventing Force ghost manifestation, suggesting maybe Palpatine somehow trapped Ben's essence, except Palpatine was dead when Ben died, so that theory requires Palpatine to have set a trap that would activate posthumously specifically for Ben, which makes zero sense. Some fans theorize Ben achieved a different form of Force transcendence, merging completely with the cosmic Force rather than maintaining individual consciousness. Others believe he's still with Rey through their dyad bond in some unexplained spiritual sense. The most cynical interpretation is that Disney simply didn't want to obligate Adam Driver to return for future projects, so they wrote Ben out permanently without considering the lore implications. Anakin Skywalker killed younglings, massacred entire separatist leadership councils, and terrorized the galaxy for 2 decades. He got a Force ghost. Ben Solo, manipulated since childhood by Palpatine, fell to darkness, but never committed atrocities on Vader's scale, achieved redemption, and sacrificed everything. He got nothing. That's not a mystery. That's a plot hole the size of the Death Star that canon has refused to address for 6 years. The Star Wars franchise has 9 mainline films, multiple series, and decades of lore, yet some of its biggest questions have never been answered. Not by the movies, not by the shows, not by anyone. So today, I'm breaking down every major unanswered mystery in Star Wars and everything we know about them, starting with a group of warriors that somehow vanished from an entire trilogy: missing Mandalorians. Mandalorians can fight Jedi to a standstill. Their armor resists lightsabers. Their culture is built entirely around war. So when the Galactic Civil War breaks out, and both the Rebellion and the Empire are desperate for every possible advantage, you'd think somebody would pick up the phone. Nobody does. Episodes 4 through 6 contain 0 Mandalorian presence. Not a single warrior, not a passing mention, not even a rumor. A culture with documented combat superiority over Force users just doesn't exist for 3 entire films and multiple galaxy-defining battles. Here's the thing. No canonical source has ever explained this. The popular theory that Mandalorians were wiped out in some off-screen conflict before the original trilogy, that's entirely fan-invented. Lucasfilm has never confirmed it, addressed the gap, or even acknowledged it exists. The silence is total. You've got 2 factions fighting for galactic control, and neither one attempts to recruit or even acknowledge the greatest warrior culture in the galaxy. But at least the Mandalorians were just ignored. The next question involves someone who was actively hidden from the most powerful Force user alive. Leia's missing training. Leia Organa has the exact same Force lineage as Luke Skywalker. Same father, same blood, same theoretical ceiling. And she wasn't just sitting around doing nothing with it either. Throughout the original trilogy, Leia demonstrated real, undeniable Force ability. She sensed Luke calling out to her across the void of space in Empire Strikes Back. She intuitively knew the truth about Vader being her father before anyone told her. That's not luck. That's raw, untrained power. So here's the thing. Yoda was alive. Yoda was training capable. And Yoda watched Luke nearly blow the entire mission multiple times because the kid couldn't control his emotions. Luke was impatient, reckless, and abandoned his training early to rush into a trap. Yoda saw all of this happening in real time, and his backup plan was nothing. He had a second Skywalker right there and made zero effort to bring her in. The irony is brutal. Yoda chose the emotionally volatile twin. Fans love to justify this. Leia was grieving Alderaan. She had political responsibilities. She had too many attachments. But here's the kicker. Those are all things Yoda could have actually said on screen. He never did. Not once. The films give us literally zero reasoning for his decision, and canon later confirmed that Leia did eventually train as a Jedi under Luke after the original trilogy. She built her own lightsaber. She had the discipline and the power all along, which makes Yoda's complete inaction during an active galactic war even harder to justify. He gambled the fate of the galaxy on one unstable farm boy when a proven leader with identical Force potential was standing right there. Vader's blind spot. Here's one that has haunted Star Wars fans for decades, and it all happens in the same movie. During the Death Star trench run, Vader locks onto Luke's X-Wing and immediately announces, "The Force is strong with this one," just like that. No hesitation, no second guessing. He felt Luke's presence through the hull of a starfighter during a high-speed dogfight. Cool. But here's the problem. Earlier in that exact same film, Vader personally interrogated Princess Leia. He was in the room with her. He used a mind probe on her, physical proximity, direct mental contact, and he detected absolutely nothing. Leia is a Skywalker. She shares the same bloodline, the same parents, the same theoretical Force potential as Luke. Vader's own daughter was sitting right in front of him, and his Force radar gave him zero signal. The best explanation fans have pieced together is that untrained, dormant Force sensitivity is harder to detect than someone actively channeling the Force, which Luke was doing during the trench run. That makes some logical sense. But here's the thing. That explanation was never stated in any film. It comes entirely from supplementary materials written years later to patch a contradiction that George Lucas almost certainly never planned around. The most powerful Sith Lord in the galaxy had his hands on his own daughter and felt nothing, but a random pilot in a starfighter instantly detected. Still one of the funniest contradictions in the franchise, and nobody has a clean answer for it. Ahsoka's disappearance. This one isn't just a mystery, it's a genuine contradiction that Lucasfilm has yet to fully address. Ahsoka Tano survived Order 66, fought through the entire Imperial era, dueled Darth Vader himself, and by the end of Star Wars Rebels, she's confirmed alive around 4 ABY. That places her roughly 31 years before the sequel trilogy, and then she just vanishes from the timeline with zero explanation. Here's where it gets complicated. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey hears the voices of past Jedi during the final battle against Palpatine. Ahsoka's voice is among them, not as a living ally, among the fallen. Fans immediately took that as confirmation she died, except Dave Filoni himself clarified that hearing her voice does not mean she's dead. He was deliberately keeping her fate ambiguous, but that ambiguity is exactly the problem. The Ahsoka series dropped in 2023, and suddenly she's alive and stranded in a completely different galaxy called Paradia around 9 ABY. That still leaves a 26-year gap before the sequels. If she's alive exploring distant galaxies, what was her voice doing in that scene? Canon still hasn't explained it. And the bigger question is even more frustrating. Ahsoka has direct experience fighting Palpatine's machinations. She trained under Anakin. She knows how the Sith operate better than almost anyone alive. When a Palpatine successor threatens the entire galaxy again, she's just not there. Nobody mentions her, nobody contacts her, the story never even acknowledges her existence. That's not a gap in the lore. That's a hole in the writing. But speaking of characters whose fates got messy after the original trilogy, the Inquisitor problem. So Vader not sensing Leia is one thing. He's got a lot on his plate. Running an empire, hunting rebels, breathing through a machine, fine. But the Inquisitors? Their entire job is detecting Force-sensitive beings. That's it. That's the whole gig. They're trained Force-sensitive hunters specifically designed to find people like Leia and eliminate them. And they couldn't find the one standing right in front of them. In the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, set in 9 BBY, young Leia has extended direct contact with multiple Inquisitors. Reva, the third sister, is actively hunting Obi-Wan throughout the show and comes into close proximity proximity with Leia repeatedly, direct confrontation, repeated interactions, and nothing. Zero detection, not even a flicker of suspicion. Here's the thing. Leia isn't just any kid with a little Force potential, she carries the Skywalker bloodline, the highest concentration of Force potential in the galaxy. Her father had a midi-chlorian count that made the Jedi Council lose their minds, and these specialized Force hunters, whose professional existence depends on sensing exactly this kind of thing, are apparently completely blind to it. Now, there is a supplementary explanation floating around. Untrained, dormant Force users are supposedly harder to detect than active practitioners, and that does some of the heavy lifting here. But the Obi-Wan series itself never states this. It never addresses the contradiction at all. You're just left watching trained specialists fail at their one job and expected to fill in the blanks yourself. But at least the Inquisitors only missed one Force-sensitive kid. Wait until you hear about the Emperor who somehow missed two. The Snoke mystery. Imagine being powerful enough to command an entire military regime, bend the will of a Skywalker, and wield the Force with genuine mastery. Now imagine that none of it was real, that your entire existence was a test designed by someone else, and you were always meant to die. That's Snoke. When The Rise of Skywalker pulled back the curtain on Exegol, we saw something genuinely disturbing. Rows of tanks filled with failed Snoke bodies, floating in fluid like discarded prototypes. Snoke wasn't a mysterious dark side entity who clawed his way to power. He was grown in a lab, a strandcast, a genetically engineered puppet created by Palpatine to do exactly one thing: manipulate Ben Solo and then get killed by him. Here's where it gets dark. Snoke's death in The Last Jedi wasn't a twist, it was the plan. Palpatine designed Snoke to be destroyed by Kylo Ren as a trial of worthiness. Every moment of manipulation, every cruel lesson, every display of power was scripted theater performed for an audience of one. Snoke's entire on-screen arc was a rehearsal for his own murder. But the films never answer the questions that actually matter. What genetic material was used to create him? How did a lab-grown clone develop independent Force abilities? And the darkest question of all, did Snoke know he was a puppet? The novels fill in fragments, suggesting he was a strand cast built from Palpatine's own genetic template supplemented with other sources. Some fans still cling to the Plagueis theory, speculating Palpatine used his old master's DNA as the base. It's never been confirmed, but it would be poetically horrific. The films give us almost nothing. A being of real power, real cruelty, and real influence, reduced to a disposable tool in a single line of exposition. But if Snoke's entire existence was a lie orchestrated from the shadows, that raises an even bigger question. How did the man pulling those strings survive being thrown down a reactor shaft 30 years earlier? Luke and Ben's night. The Last Jedi does something that almost no Star Wars film has ever attempted. It shows you the same event 3 times and refuses to tell you which version is real. Here's what we know for certain. One night, Luke Skywalker went to his nephew Ben Solo's hut while he slept. What happened next depends entirely on who's telling the story. Luke's version, he sensed overwhelming darkness in Ben, and for a single fleeting moment, pure instinct, he ignited his lightsaber. He immediately felt shame and stopped, but it was too late. Ben woke up and saw his uncle standing over him with a weapon. Ben's version, Luke came to murder him in his sleep. No hesitation, no conflict. Just a Jedi Master with a green blade trying to kill a sleeping student. Ben defended himself, and everything burned. And then there's the invisible third version. Snoke had been manipulating Ben for years, whispering into his mind, warping his perception. So whatever Ben remembers might not even be what Ben experienced. It might be what Snoke wanted him to experience. Here's the thing. This ambiguity isn't an accident. Rian Johnson confirmed he deliberately modeled this after Obi-Wan's certain point of view explanation from Return of the Jedi. No version is designed to be the objective truth. The film treats that as a feature, not a flaw. But the consequence is massive. Kylo Ren's entire moral arc, his betrayal, his rage, his eventual redemption, all of it rests on an event the audience is never given a stable version of. If Luke truly considered murder, Ben's anger is justified. If Ben's memory was corrupted by Snoke, then his entire villain arc is built on a lie he doesn't know about. Some fans call this the most sophisticated character question in the franchise. Others call it the most frustrating, unresolved betrayal in Star Wars history. And honestly, both positions are completely valid. The film asks you to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, and whether that's brilliant or infuriating says more about you than it does about the movie. But if you think conflicting memories are confusing, wait until we talk about a mystery that spans the entire Skywalker bloodline from the very beginning. World between worlds. Let me describe something to you. There is a confirmed canonical dimension in Star Wars that connects every single point in time and space. You can walk into it, reach into the past, pull someone out of their own death, and walk back out. And that's not a fan theory, that's not speculation. That actually happened on screen. In Star Wars Rebels, a teenage Padawan named Ezra Bridger discovered a gateway on the planet Lothal and stepped into what's called the World Between Worlds. Once inside, he literally reached through a portal and yanked Ahsoka Tano out of her duel with Darth Vader mid-fight, seconds before she would have died. He saved her life by pulling her through time. Then he walked back out. Here's where it gets complicated. Palpatine himself tried to gain access to this realm. The Emperor of the Galactic Empire, the most powerful Sith Lord in 1,000 years, believed that controlling this dimension would grant him mastery over existence itself. Not just the galaxy, existence. That's how significant this place is. Palpatine thought it was worth more than the Death Star, more than the clone army, more than everything he'd already built. And then it just disappeared from the franchise. Nobody in the sequel trilogy mentions it. Nobody tries to find it. Nobody uses it to prevent any of the catastrophic events that follow. A working, proven mechanism for altering galactic history was introduced, used exactly once by a character who then vanished into another dimension and essentially shelved. The entire sequel trilogy plays out with conflicts that this realm could theoretically have resolved, and zero characters even acknowledge its existence. That's arguably the single most underexplored concept in all of Star Wars canon. Not a mystery that needs solving, but an answer that raises bigger questions than any mystery ever could. But if a time-bending dimension feels too abstract to worry about, wait until we get to a conspiracy theory so unhinged that the fanbase has spent years building an actual case for it. Knights of Ren. The Knights of Ren might be the single biggest gap between concept and execution in all of Star Wars. A centuries-old dark side cult operating in the unknown regions, completely outside the Jedi-Sith binary, wielding their own unique weapons and following their own Force philosophy. That sounds like the most important piece of lore in the entire sequel trilogy, and the films treated them like background extras. Here's what we actually know. The Knights of Ren existed for generations before the First Order was even a concept. They weren't Sith. They weren't fallen Jedi. They were something else entirely, a parallel Force tradition that survived undetected through the entire Republic era, the rise and fall of the Empire and the early New Republic. Nobody found them. Nobody even knew they were out there. A hidden dark side cult operating for centuries in secret, and the Jedi Order with all their wisdom and foresight never noticed. Ben Solo became their leader after destroying Luke's temple, earning the title by surviving a brutal trial and killing the previous leader. He took the name Kylo Ren. 6 named knights followed him: Vikrul, Trudgen, Kuruk, Aplek, Cardo, and Ushar. Each had specialized weapons. Each had individual combat roles. Each had exactly 0 meaningful screen time in the films. Their origin, their philosophy, their connection to Snoke or Palpatine, their strategic role within the First Order, all of it lives exclusively in visual dictionaries and reference books. The movies gave them cool masks and moody lighting. That's it. And the punchline? In The Rise of Skywalker, a newly redeemed Ben Solo defeats all 6 of them in roughly 30 seconds. Rey passes him the Skywalker lightsaber through their Force dyad, and he cuts through centuries of dark side tradition faster than a cantina bar fight. But if wasted potential frustrates you, wait until you hear about the one place in Star Wars that could literally rewrite everything: Palpatine's blind spot. Palpatine is supposed to be the ultimate mastermind, the guy who manipulated the entire Galactic Senate, orchestrated a galaxy-wide war on both sides simultaneously, and destroyed a 1,000-year-old Jedi Order from the inside. This is a man who plans decades ahead, and yet somehow he had zero idea that his own apprentice had children. Let that sink in for a second. Luke Skywalker grew up on Tatooine, Vader's home planet, raised by the Lars family, Vader's step-family, under the surname Skywalker, Vader's actual last name. Nobody changed it. Nobody moved him off-world. Nobody gave him a fake identity. The kid was living under his father's name, on his father's planet, with his father's relatives. That's not hiding. That's barely even trying. And then there's Leia. She was adopted by Senator Bail Organa, one of the most prominent political figures in the galaxy, raised on Alderaan in full public view, a princess, attending Imperial Senate sessions. If Palpatine had spent 5 minutes investigating Bail Organa's sudden acquisition of a daughter around the exact same time Padme died, the entire rebellion collapses before it starts. But here's the thing. The moment Luke gets anywhere near the Death Star, Palpatine senses him through the Force instantly. He feels Luke's presence like a beacon, so his Force sensitivity clearly works. He can detect powerful Force users without breaking a sweat. But for 19 years, 2 of the most Force-sensitive beings in galactic history were growing up in plain sight, and he felt nothing. Some fans theorize that the Force itself shielded the twins, actively concealing them from detection. It's a cool idea, but no official source has ever confirmed it. No film, no novel, no comic has given a canonical explanation for why the galaxy's supreme spymaster and most powerful Sith Lord couldn't do what a basic background check would have accomplished. It's the single biggest logical gap in the franchise. And honestly, it only gets more absurd the more you think about it. But speaking of things that break under scrutiny, let's talk about a mystery that literally bends reality itself: Palpatine's survival. Let's talk about the single most controversial moment in the entire sequel trilogy. Palpatine was thrown down a reactor shaft by Darth Vader. The Death Star 2 exploded. The galaxy celebrated. The Emperor was dead. Case closed, right? 30 years later, he's back. And the movie's explanation for how: a single line from Poe Dameron. Somehow Palpatine returned. That's it. That's what audiences got. Here's the thing. There is an actual explanation. It's just not in the movie. Canon establishes that Palpatine used an ancient Sith ritual called essence transfer to shoot his consciousness into a cloned body on Exegol, a hidden Sith world so secret that his own empire didn't know it existed. His original body died, his mind survived, and for approximately 30 years, he existed inside a decaying, deteriorating clone hooked up to mechanical life support in an underground lab, pulling strings across the entire galaxy. Let that sink in. The main villain of the sequel trilogy was a rotting corpse in a basement for 3 decades. But it gets wilder. The clone body was failing, so Palpatine created multiple clone iterations searching for a vessel strong enough to contain his full power. None of them worked. His own son, a non-Force sensitive clone, escaped Exegol and had a daughter, Rey, born 15 ABY, 11 years after Palpatine's death. She was the intended host body the entire time. His granddaughter wasn't an accident. She was the endgame of a bloodline engineering project he was running from inside a collapsing body on a planet nobody could find. And here's where it gets frustrating. None of this is in the films. Not really. The mechanism, the timeline, the scope of his post-death scheming, all of it lives in the Rise of Skywalker novelization, visual dictionaries, and companion comics. The movie that built its entire plot around Palpatine's return never bothered to explain Palpatine's return. Audiences weren't confused because they weren't paying attention. They were confused because the information literally wasn't on screen. This isn't just an unanswered question. It's the unanswered question that the entire final chapter of the Skywalker saga was structurally built around. And the fact that you needed a reading list to understand it is exactly why, somehow, Palpatine Returned became the most memed line in modern Star Wars. But speaking of things that break the rules of the Star Wars universe, there's one mysterious realm that might be the most powerful and least understood concept in the entire franchise: Anakin's conception. This is the one that breaks everything. Not a side mystery, not a fun Easter egg. This is the question that, if answered definitively, rewrites the entire Star Wars saga from the ground up. Here's what we know. Shmi Skywalker told Qui-Gon Jinn plainly in The Phantom Menace that there was no father. She carried Anakin, gave birth to Anakin, and raised Anakin, but nobody fathered him. The pregnancy just happened. The Force, she believed, was responsible. And when the Jedi tested young Anakin's midi-chlorian count, it came back at over 20,000, higher than any Jedi in recorded history, higher than Yoda, higher than anyone thought was possible. For years, that was the extent of it. A miraculous birth, a chosen child, and a prophecy about balance. Simple enough. But then Darth Vader issue 25 changed everything. The comic reveals a vision showing Palpatine using the dark side of the Force to directly manipulate midi-chlorians and cause Shmi's pregnancy. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, the panel shows Palpatine's shadow looming over Shmi as the Force conception takes place. The implication is staggering. The man who would become Emperor, the galaxy's greatest tyrant, personally engineered the birth of Anakin Skywalker years before he ever met the boy on Naboo. Let that sink in. Palpatine potentially created the Chosen One, the weapon that would eventually destroy him. And here's where it gets complicated. If Palpatine created Anakin, then what does the prophecy even mean? Was Anakin truly chosen by the Force to bring balance, or was he a Sith experiment that accidentally fulfilled a prophecy he was never meant to be part of? Was his fall to the dark side inevitable because his creator was the dark side? Was his redemption in Return of the Jedi a triumph of free will, or just another variable Palpatine failed to account for? The full mechanism of how you use the Force to create biological life has never been explained in any film or major canon work. The comic confirms it happened, but tells us nothing about the how or the why. Whether Palpatine intended Anakin as a weapon, a vessel, a test, or something else entirely remains completely unresolved. And that's what makes this the biggest unanswered question in Star Wars. Every other mystery on this list exists within the story. This one exists underneath it. If Anakin was always Palpatine's creation, then the entire prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, and the concept of destiny itself in this universe become fundamentally more complicated. The Chosen One might have never been chosen at all. He might have been designed. Was Anakin Skywalker ever truly free, or was he always Palpatine's design, from his very first breath to his very last? Star Wars has never answered that, and honestly, maybe it shouldn't. Star Wars built a universe where Jedi can sense feelings across the galaxy, detect the dark side from parsecs away, and identify Force-sensitive children on planets they've never visited. But somehow, the entire Jedi Council sat in meetings with the most powerful Sith Lord in history for 13 years and never noticed. That's why today I'm breaking down the 8 biggest plot holes that shatter Star Wars canon and every explanation that exists for them, starting with the one that makes the Jedi look like complete idiots: the Jedi's blindness. Here's the thing. Palpatine wasn't hiding on some remote planet. He was Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, attending council meetings in person, sitting directly across from Yoda and Mace Windu while orchestrating a galactic war as Darth Sidious. And these same Jedi could sense Count Dooku's turn to the dark side instantly during their duel. They routinely detected disturbances in the Force from across star systems, but the Sith mastermind standing right in front of them? Zero detection. And before you say the Jedi were just arrogant, the movies actually acknowledge this plot hole. Mace Windu literally says their ability to use the Force has diminished. Yoda admits the dark side clouds everything. The films are telling you something doesn't add up here, but here's where it gets worse. Palpatine operated as Darth Sidious for over a decade. He orchestrated the Clone Wars, manipulated senators, commanded separatist armies, and murdered Jedi, all while maintaining his public identity. The logistics alone should have exposed him. Communication records, whereabouts during battles, and unexplained absences. Nobody investigated. Lucasfilm tried to fix this mess across multiple books and comics. They revealed that a Sith shrine exists directly beneath the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. The Jedi built their temple there, thinking it would neutralize the dark side energy. Instead, it weakened their Force perception for 1,000 years. They also explained that Sith developed Force concealment techniques specifically designed to hide from Jedi, refined across generations under the rule of 2. Cool. But that makes the Jedi even more incompetent. Are you telling me the galaxy's protectors built their headquarters on top of a Sith shrine and never noticed it corrupting them for a millennium? The real answer is that George Lucas didn't plan the prequels when writing the originals. Palpatine was revealed as the Emperor in 1983. His entire Clone Wars manipulation scheme was invented 20 years later. The plot hole exists because the story was written backwards, and no amount of novels can change what we see on screen. An entire religion of space wizards failed to detect evil incarnates sitting in their conference room, but at least the Jedi had an excuse for their failure. The next plot hole involves medical technology that can rebuild a man as a cyborg, but apparently can't stop someone from dying of sadness. Padme's death. The galaxy can rebuild Darth Vader as a walking life support system after he's burned alive and loses 3 limbs, but it can't save a medically healthy woman. Let me explain why this is the dumbest death in Star Wars history. After giving birth to Luke and Leia, Padme Amidala dies on the operating table. The medical droid delivers one of cinema's most mocked lines. Medically, she's completely healthy. For reasons we can't explain, we're losing her. She has lost the will to live. In a universe with back-to-tanks, cybernetic reconstruction, and cloning technology, doctors are defeated by sadness. Here's where it gets insulting. Padme Amidala survived multiple assassination attempts across Attack of the Clones. She led military operations in the Clone Wars. She was a warrior queen turned senator who fought in the Battle of Geonosis while pregnant. Her final words aren't despair. She tells Obi-Wan there's still good in Anakin. That's hope, not someone who's given up. But George Lucas needed her dead so Luke and Leia could be orphans. Character motivation didn't matter. Story logic didn't matter. We get a strong female character reduced to dying from a broken heart because the plot demanded it. The fan community developed a theory that actually makes sense. Palpatine used Darth Plagueis techniques to drain Padme's life force and transfer it to Anakin during his reconstruction as Vader, and I can prove this wasn't accidental. Sound designer Ben Burt confirmed he deliberately synced Padme's heartbeat with Vader's during the surgery sequence. As her heart stops, his suit activates. Palpatine knows about her death instantly, despite her secret medical facility location. He smiles when telling Vader, "In your anger, you killed her." Most damning, Vader could sense through the Force that Padme was alive during his surgery, until the exact moment she dies, coinciding perfectly with his suit's completion. That's not subtext. That's Palpatine murdering Padme to fuel Vader's transformation, framed as a natural death because explaining Sith magic would have added runtime. Lucasfilm never officially confirmed this. Instead, they created an even bigger problem, because Padme's death at childbirth means that remembering her mother is completely impossible. Leia's memories. In Return of the Jedi, Luke asks Leia about their real mother. She responds with specific details. She was very beautiful, kind, but sad. She describes images and feelings. Luke says he has no memory of her at all. Cool. Except that Padme died within minutes of giving birth to them. Leia is describing memories that are physically impossible. Newborns don't form visual memories. They definitely don't retain personality impressions from someone they met for 30 seconds while dying. But George Lucas filmed this dialogue in 1982, 23 years before showing us Padme's death scene. When Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005, fans immediately noticed the contradiction. Lucas acknowledged this plot hole in behind-the-scenes footage. His defense? He chose emotional impact over logic. He wanted Padme's death to be tragic, so he killed her during childbirth. The scene where Leia remembers her mother, that stayed in every version of Return of the Jedi, including the special editions he personally oversaw. He had decades to remove or change that dialogue. He kept it because he didn't care about continuity. Here's where it gets desperate. Lucasfilm deployed multiple books and comics to fix what can't be fixed. Star Wars Adventures. Annual 2019 shows young Leia's adoptive mother telling stories about Padme in front of a statue, using the exact language of images and feelings. The Leia Princess of Alderaan manga reveals she experienced Force visions and dreams about her birth mother. Neither explanation addresses why Luke, who's equally Force-sensitive, has zero such impressions. The most accepted fan theory is that Leia formed an embryonic Force bond with Padme's emotions during the birth trauma. Some fans obsessively analyzed Revenge of the Sith and noticed baby Leia's eyes are shown open while Luke's are closed, possibly intentional symbolism showing Leia was more aware and receptive. But here's the real issue. This is a filmed contradiction between two movies Lucas personally directed. No comic book or novel can change what's on screen. Leia describes detailed memories of someone who died before she could form memories. It's impossible, and it exists because Lucas prioritized making Padme's death sad over making his own continuity work. At least Leia's false memories don't break the entire saga. The next plot hole involves characters who forget people they spent years working alongside. Obi-Wan's amnesia. When Luke brings R2-D2 to Obi-Wan's home in A New Hope, the old Jedi delivers a line that makes zero sense after watching the prequels. "I don't seem to remember ever owning a droid." Technically true. He never owned R2-D2, but he also fought alongside that exact astromech for 13 years and never once forgot who he was. R2-D2 saved Obi-Wan's life in The Phantom Menace. They flew missions together throughout Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and the Clone Wars animated series shows them on over 100 missions across 3 years of galactic war. Obi-Wan watched this droid repair his starfighter under fire, hack separatist computers, and electrocute battle droids. They were war buddies. But here's where the plot hole gets worse. C-3PO was built by Anakin Skywalker on Tatooine. Obi-Wan was there. He saw the protocol droid as a kid and watched him grow from parts into a finished android. Then Owen Lars purchases C-3PO from Jawas in A New Hope without recognizing the droid, who literally lived on his moisture farm in Attack of the Clones. The droid his stepbrother built. Nobody remembers anyone. And here's the kicker. C-3PO had his memory wiped at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Captain Antilles orders it specifically to protect the Skywalker twins. R2-D2's memory was never wiped, so Anakin refused to wipe R2 throughout the Clone Wars despite protocol requiring it. That astromech knows everything. He knows Anakin became Vader. He knows Luke and Leia are siblings. He has recordings of Padme, the Jedi Order, the Clone Wars, and Palpatine's entire conspiracy. He reveals none of this across the entire original trilogy. Lucasfilm explains that Obi-Wan was using Jedi deception, speaking from a certain point of view. He never owned R2, so his statement is technically accurate. Classic Obi-Wan manipulation to protect Luke from learning learning about his father too soon. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series reinforces this pattern. He constantly hides information when he thinks it's necessary. For R2-D2's silence, the official answer is loyalty. Anakin trusted him with secrets for years, and the droid proved he could keep information classified when necessary. In the Clone Wars, military command repeatedly tried to have R2's memory wiped. Anakin refused every time because he trusted the droid's judgment. That trust extended to protecting Luke and Leia by staying silent. The Rise of Skywalker novelization reveals R2 backed up C-3PO's wiped memories and eventually restored them, meaning C-3PO now remembers the entire Skywalker saga, which raises the question of why R2 waited 40 years to give his best friend his memories back, but nobody talks about that. At least the droid plot hole has explanations that kind of work. The next one involves a character mastering abilities in hours that took other Jedi years to learn. Rey's instant mastery. Rey goes from believing the Force is a myth to performing a Jedi mind trick in approximately 6 hours. Let me explain why this broke Star Wars for an entire generation of fans. Within her first day of Force awareness, Rey accomplishes what took other Force users years of training. She successfully mind tricks a stormtrooper despite never knowing this ability existed. She resists Kylo Ren's mental interrogation, then reverses it to read his mind. She force pulls Luke's lightsaber away from Kylo, a trained Force user actively trying to claim it. Then she defeats him in lightsaber combat despite never holding one before that day. Here's the comparison that makes this insulting. Luke Skywalker trained with Obi-Wan aboard the Millennium Falcon, spent weeks with Yoda on Dagobah, and still got his hand cut off by Vader in their first real duel. Anakin Skywalker trained at the Jedi Temple for over a decade before becoming a knight. Rey does comparable feats within hours of learning that the Force exists. Screenwriter Max Landis publicly called Rey a Mary Sue immediately after The Force Awakens was released. A Mary Sue is an unrealistically competent character with no learning curve who succeeds at everything without struggle. The accusation triggered industry-wide debate about whether criticizing Rey's abilities was a legitimate storytelling critique or misogyny, but the plot hole isn't her gender. It's that 40 years of Star Wars established Force mastery requires training, and Rey demolishes that rule with zero explanation in the theatrical cut. The Force Awakens novelization introduces a concept the movie never mentions. When Kylo Ren probed Rey's mind, she inadvertently absorbed his Force knowledge through their connection. A Force download. The Rise of Skywalker later reveals they share a Force dyad, an extremely rare phenomenon where two Force users are essentially one in the Force. This supposedly explains her accelerated abilities. Cool, except that's a retcon invented to justify what was already filmed. The movie itself provides zero indication that this is happening. Audiences watching The Force Awakens had no context for why Rey could do any of this. Defenders point out that Kylo was emotionally compromised during their duel. He'd just murdered his father and taken a bowcaster bolt to the ribs from Chewbacca. The novelization confirms he was bleeding and weakened. Rey also trained with a quarterstaff her entire life on Jakku, so she had melee combat experience translating to lightsaber fighting. But here's what breaks it. Rey doesn't just win a weakened duel. She performs advanced Force techniques with zero instruction. The Jedi mind trick requires concentration and practice. Luke couldn't do it in The Empire Strikes Back after training. Rey does it casually because the plot needed her to escape. The sequel trilogy needed a powerful protagonist immediately, so they gave Rey abilities without earning them. Then spent 2 more movies and multiple novels justifying what should have been explained from the start. At least Rey's powers can be explained with dyad theory and Palpatine bloodlines. The next plot hole introduces a military tactic that retroactively breaks every space battle in Star Wars history, the Holdo maneuver. Vice Admiral Holdo rams the Resistance cruiser at light speed directly into the First Order's flagship, creating one of the most visually stunning moments in Star Wars history. The 60-kilometer dreadnought splits in half, destroying most of their fleet in a single impact. Fans immediately asked the question that breaks everything. Why has nobody done this before in 40 years of space battles? The logical problems cascade instantly. Why didn't the rebels ram a ship into either Death Star? Both stations had massive surface areas and were stationary targets. A single X-wing at light speed would have penetrated the superstructure. Why didn't anyone use this during the Clone Wars with disposable droid crews? Why hasn't the Empire developed hyperspace missiles if this tactic works? The implications make every piloted spacecraft obsolete when droids could execute kamikaze jumps. Director Rian Johnson defended the scene by saying that just because we haven't seen something doesn't mean it was impossible. But that's exactly what a plot hole is. 40 years of established warfare doctrine across 9 films, multiple TV series, and countless battles never once deployed the most devastating tactic available. Either every military commander in Star Wars history is incompetent, or the maneuver shouldn't work. The Rise of Skywalker attempts a fix through one line of dialogue. Finn dismisses using the tactic again by saying, "That move is 1 in a million." The novelizations explain that ships pass through a split-second near-lightspeed window before entering hyperspace proper, and Holdo had to time her impact during that microsecond transition, requiring precise calculations of speed, distance, and target trajectory. Safety protocols normally prevent hyperspace jumps near obstacles, so she manually overrode them. Here's where the explanation falls apart. The Rise of Skywalker's final battle appears to show another successful hyperspace ram destroying a Star Destroyer above Endor. The Radis was a capital ship. If smaller vessels can execute the maneuver, why aren't Y-Wings doing this constantly? And Poe's lightspeed skipping in the same film shows ships jumping directly near gravity wells and obstacles, contradicting the safety protocol explanation entirely. Laura Dern hinted in interviews that Holdo might have been force-sensitive, suggesting the maneuver required force-enhanced timing and precision like Luke's Death Star torpedo shot. That speculation, never confirmed, and introduces even more problems. If force sensitivity is required, why can't any Jedi pilot execute this? Why didn't Anakin, the greatest pilot in the galaxy, ever consider it? The real issue is that The Last Jedi introduced a visually spectacular sequence without considering the implications. Every space battle moving forward must address why combatants don't employ this tactic. The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and future Star Wars content now inherit a universe where the most effective military strategy is apparently ignored for no reason. Fans call this weaponized hyperspace, creating a plot hole the size of a superstar destroyer. It's a single scene that retroactively breaks decades of established space combat logic, and no amount of 1 in a million dialogue can close it. But if you think one tactical contradiction ruins Star Wars warfare, wait until you see how The Last Jedi handled the saga's greatest hero, Luke's exile. The Luke Skywalker who refused to kill Darth Vader now stands over his sleeping nephew with an ignited lightsaber, considering murder based on a vision. Then he abandons everyone he loves and the entire galaxy for years, while the First Order rises to power. Let me explain why this character assassination created the sequel trilogy's biggest controversy. Luke's defining moment in Return of the Jedi is throwing away his lightsaber rather than killing his father. He tells the Emperor and the entire Empire that he sees good in Darth Vader. This is a man responsible for planetary genocide, murdering children at the Jedi Temple, torturing Luke's friends, and cutting off Luke's hand. Luke sensed the conflict in him and refused to give up. That's who Luke Skywalker is. The Last Jedi shows us Luke drawing his weapon, igniting it, and standing over Ben Solo, ready to strike because he sensed darkness, not actual evil, not committed atrocities, a premonition of possible future darkness. The movie frames this as a brief moment of weakness, but that explanation ignores the logistics. Luke had to walk to Ben's hut, draw his lightsaber, activate it, and raise it in a striking position. That requires intent. Here's where it gets worse. Luke then cuts himself off from the Force and hides on Ahch-To for years. He refuses to help Leia and the Resistance. He won't train Rey. When he learns Han Solo is dead, murdered by the nephew he failed, he still won't leave. The man who rushed to Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back, despite Yoda's warnings, who risked everything to save his friends repeatedly, now refuses to help anyone. Mark Hamill publicly disagreed with every choice made for his character. He told multiple outlets that Jedi don't give up, and even if Luke had problems, he'd take time to regroup and return. Hamill said he had to think of the character as Jake Skywalker because it wasn't the Luke he knew. He fundamentally disagreed with the entire portrayal and went on record saying so before the film released. Director Rian Johnson intended Luke's failure to show that even heroes can fall into despair and disillusionment. The Rashomon-style sequence, showing 3 different perspectives of the Ben Solo confrontation, demonstrates how memory and guilt distort events. Luke's final act, projecting himself across the galaxy to save the Resistance while confronting Kylo Ren, supposedly redeems his character by showing he never truly lost his heroism. But here's the fundamental problem. Character arcs require internal consistency. Luke's exile contradicts everything established about his personality across 3 films. He's reckless, impulsive, and driven by protecting others, even when it endangers himself. Making him a suicidal hermit who abandons his sister requires explanation. The film never provides beyond "he felt really bad. The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett depict Luke between trilogies as hopeful, heroic, and committed to rebuilding the Jedi Order. This is widely interpreted as Lucasfilm course-correcting the characterization after fan backlash. The disconnect between Rian Johnson's deconstructive vision and J.J. Abrams' nostalgic approach created contradictions no amount of supplementary content can reconcile. Luke Skywalker's exile represents the sequel trilogy's core identity crisis. Individual directors pursued personal visions without coordinated planning, forcing each film to accommodate or actively contradict what came before. Which brings us to the final and most infamous plot hole in Star Wars history: Palpatine's resurrection. The opening crawl of The Rise of Skywalker announces, "The dead speak." We watched Emperor Palpatine get thrown down a reactor shaft, explode, and then watch Death Star 2 explode. He's dead, twice confirmed dead, but somehow he's back, and the entire theatrical explanation is delivered through Poe Dameron in one line. Somehow Palpatine returned. That's it. That's the explanation for resurrecting the saga's ultimate villain. Somehow. Not through flashbacks, not through exposition, not through any narrative setup whatsoever. The word somehow became the symbol of the sequel trilogy's approach to storytelling. Don't explain, just assert. Here's why this plot hole destroys more than just one movie. Palpatine's death was the emotional climax of Return of the Jedi and the entire original trilogy. Anakin Skywalker's redemption, his fulfillment of the Chosen One prophecy to destroy the Sith, centered on killing Palpatine. Vader's sacrifice saved Luke and brought balance to the Force. His final moment with his son, his funeral pyre on Endor, meant something because Palpatine was dead and the Empire defeated. The Rise of Skywalker erases that. Palpatine never died. Vader's sacrifice meant nothing. The prophecy failed. Luke and Leia's struggle accomplished nothing permanent. The Emperor was manipulating events for 30 years after Return of the Jedi, meaning every victory was hollow, and nobody planned this. Neither The Force Awakens nor The Last Jedi foreshadowed Palpatine's involvement. Rian Johnson killed Supreme Leader Snoke in The Last Jedi, eliminating the trilogy's planned villain. J.J. Abrams took over Episode 9, needing a final boss, so he resurrected Palpatine because there wasn't time to establish anyone else. Here's where it gets insulting. The actual explanation for Palpatine's return doesn't exist in the movie. The Rise of Skywalker novelization reveals he transferred his consciousness to a clone body on Exegol while falling down the Death Star shaft. Actor Ian McDiarmid confirmed this was originally scripted but cut from the theatrical release. More absurdly, Palpatine's threatening broadcast to the galaxy was exclusively revealed in a Fortnite promotional event on December 14th, 2019, not in the actual movie, in a video game crossover event. Supplementary materials tried patching this across multiple sources. The Secrets of the Sith book explains that Palpatine couldn't leave Exegol, so he influenced events through Snoke. The Mandalorian Season 3 introduced Project Necromance, or connecting cloning experiments to his resurrection. Comics released in February 2025 finally canonized the Fortnite broadcast. Fans needed homework assignments across multiple media formats released over 5 years to understand the main villain's motivation. The sequel trilogy's fundamental problem isn't individual plot holes, it's the lack of coordinated vision. J.J. Abrams set up mystery boxes in The Force Awakens. Rian Johnson actively subverted those mysteries in The Last Jedi. Abrams returned for The Rise of Skywalker, attempting damage control while inventing new plot points. Colin Trevorrow was fired as the original Episode 9 director, adding more instability. 3 films with 3 different creative directions pretending to be one coherent story. The result is a trilogy requiring novels, comics, video games, and animated series to explain what should have been clear on screen. Where George Lucas created retroactive contradictions by writing prequels decades later, the sequel trilogy created contradictions in real time by refusing to plan. These 8 plot holes represent 50 years of Star Wars at war with itself. The franchise expanded beyond any single vision, accumulating contradictions faster than supplementary materials could patch them. Every new project inherits decades of established canon while inevitably creating new problems. The Clone Wars transformed Anakin's rushed corruption into a gradual descent across 7 seasons. Rogue One turned the Death Star's exhaust port from a design flaw into deliberate sabotage. These fixes work because they enhance rather than contradict what came before. But some contradictions resist elegant solutions. Leia's impossible memories, the Holdo maneuver's implications, Luke's character shift, and Palpatine's unexplained resurrection remain debated because no amount of novels can alter what audiences saw in theaters. For fans, part Parsing these plot holes has become its own form of engagement, part frustration and part creative problem solving, the unintended consequence of building a universe that grew far beyond anyone's control. Star Wars has been around for nearly 50 years, and in that time, it's managed to contradict itself in ways that are honestly impressive. We're talking plot holes so dumb, they span entire trilogies, break their own rules, and somehow nobody in a room full of writers caught them. So today I'm breaking down the absolute dumbest ones, starting with a classic that every single fan has noticed, Leia's impossible memory. Beautiful, kind, but sad. That's how Leia describes her mother to Luke in Return of the Jedi. It's a genuine, warm, deeply personal memory. She's not guessing, she's not speculating. She remembers this woman. She remembers her face. Cool. But then Revenge of the Sith happens. Padme Amidala dies minutes after giving birth. Minutes. Leia never opened her eyes to a living mother. There was no childhood. There were no quiet moments together. Padme flatlined before Leia could form a single conscious thought, let alone a detailed memory of someone being beautiful, kind, but sad. So what exactly is Leia remembering? Fans have thrown everything at this one. Force impressions, constructed memories from her adoptive parents on Alderaan, some kind of emotional residue from the womb. And honestly, some of those explanations are creative. But here's the thing, Lucasfilm has never confirmed a single one of them. There is zero official explanation for how Leia has a vivid childhood memory of a woman who died the day she was born. This is the contradiction that spans 2 entire trilogies and directly reshapes how you understand one of the saga's most important characters, and it's never been addressed. But if you think a broken memory is bad, wait until you see what happens when lightsabers forget their own rules. Obi-Wan's droid amnesia. This one drives people absolutely insane, and honestly, I get it. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan sits down across from R2-D2 and says, "I don't seem to remember ever owning a droid. Just a casual throwaway line. No big deal." Except then, the prequels happened. Across 3 entire films, R2-D2 is Anakin Skywalker's constant companion. Everywhere Anakin goes, R2 goes. And who is standing right next to Anakin for literally years? Obi-Wan Kenobi. They fight together, they fly together, R2 saves their lives multiple times. Obi-Wan absolutely, undeniably knows this droid. So what happened? Did he just forget? Did 19 years on Tatooine melt his brain? Here's the thing, fans have constructed what I like to call the lawyer defense. And it goes like this. Obi-Wan said he never remembered owning a droid. He didn't say he'd never seen one. R2 was Anakin's droid, not his. So technically, if you squint hard enough and read the line like a contract negotiation, Obi-Wan isn't lying. He's just being the most pedantic man in the galaxy. And look, it works. Barely. If you treat Obi-Wan like he's choosing every word with surgical precision while sitting in a sand hut talking to a farm boy, sure. But nobody talks like that. And nobody hears, "I don't remember ever owning a droid," and thinks, "Ah yes, a precise legal distinction about property rights." You hear that line and you think, the old man has no idea who this little blue trash can is. The real answer? George Lucas hadn't written the prequels yet. That line was never meant to hold up under 3 more movies of R2 screen time. But no official Lucasfilm statement has ever confirmed the ownership technicality reading. It's a fan-built escape hatch, and it's held together with duct tape and good intentions. But at least Obi-Wan only forgot a droid. Wait until you hear about a character who remembers something that literally never happened. Lightsabers and blood. Star Wars fans love bringing up the cauterization thing. You know the one. Lightsabers are so hot, they instantly seal any wound they create. No blood, no mess, just a clean cut and a screaming victim. It's one of those well-actually facts that gets thrown around constantly as proof that Star Wars has airtight internal logic, except it doesn't. Because characters bleed from lightsaber wounds, on screen. In the actual movies, the cantina scene in A New Hope, Obi-Wan slices off Ponda Baba's arm and there's blood pooling on the floor. Literal blood from a lightsaber wound, the weapon that supposedly makes bleeding impossible. And that's not a one-time thing. Multiple moments across the franchise show injuries that don't behave the way the lightsaber's cauterize rule says they should. Sometimes the wound is perfectly clean and sealed. Sometimes there's blood. Zero consistency. Here's the thing. Nobody at Lucasfilm has ever formally codified the cauterization rule. There's no production note that says lightsabers always cauterize, no exceptions. There's no creator commentary explaining why some wounds bleed and others don't. The rule that fans treat as gospel, it was never officially a rule. So what happened? Probably the simplest explanation. Different films, different directors, different makeup departments, and nobody kept a master document on lightsaber wound physics, which is honestly hilarious when you think about it. A franchise that tracks hyperspace routes and midi-chlorian counts couldn't keep straight whether laser swords make you bleed. It never breaks a single plot. It never changes a character's fate. But once you see it, you will never unsee it. And speaking of things that don't add up when you look too closely, the Millennium Falcon has a propulsion problem that's way harder to explain away. The Falcon's broken hyperdrive. Let's talk about the most important ship malfunction in movie history that somehow doesn't matter 5 minutes later. In A New Hope, Imperial forces board the Millennium Falcon and disable its hyperdrive. This is treated as a big deal. The Empire specifically targets the hyperdrive because without it, the Falcon can't jump to light speed. It can't outrun Star Destroyers. It can't deliver the Death Star plans to the Rebel base. Tactically, this is a checkmate move. The Imperials aren't amateurs. They know exactly what disabling that system means. But then, the Falcon just leaves. Han and the crew escape, deliver the plans, and the entire third act of the movie happens. The trench run, the medal ceremony, all of it. None of that works if the Falcon doesn't get away, which means this single escape sequence is load-bearing for the entire film. So how did they pull it off? Here's where it gets complicated. The most common defense is that disabled hyperdrive doesn't mean disabled engines. The hyperdrive handles faster than light travel. Sublight engines handle normal propulsion. If only the hyperdrive was knocked out, the Falcon could still fly, still maneuver, still technically escape at slower speeds. And honestly, that tracks. It makes mechanical sense within the Star Wars universe. But here's the thing, nobody ever confirms this on screen. No character says good thing they only hit the hyperdrive. No dialogue clarifies what system survived. The movie just moves forward and hopes you don't ask questions. And look, the defense is genuinely plausible. Sublight engines and hyperdrives are clearly separate systems throughout the franchise. Empire Strikes Back proves that when the Falcon limps to Bespin, without hyperdrive, but still flies perfectly fine otherwise. But plausible and confirmed are two very different things, and for a plot point this critical, probably fine is doing a lot of heavy lifting. But if you think an unexplained escape is frustrating, wait until we get to a droid who knows everything about the fall of the Republic and just never mentions it. The droid memory double standard. Let's talk about one of the most baffling HR decisions in galactic history. At the end of Revenge of the Sith, Bail Organa does something completely reasonable. He orders C-3PO's memory wiped. Clean slate, factory reset. And honestly, fair enough. 3PO is a walking liability. The droid cannot stop talking. He narrates his own anxiety in real time. If you needed to hide the existence of two secret children from a galaxy-spanning Sith regime, the absolute last droid you'd trust with that information is the one who treats every conversation like an open mic night. So wiping 3PO makes perfect sense. No argument there. But then Bail Organa looks at R2-D2, Anakin Skywalker's personal astromech droid, the little blue barrel that spent the entire Clone Wars glued to the most dangerous Jedi in the galaxy, and just leaves him alone, full memory, completely intact. Every file, every recording, every mission log from years of classified operations just sitting there in his memory banks like an unlocked phone at a crime scene. Here's the thing, the strongest defense anyone has come up with is that R2 didn't directly witness Anakin's near death on Mustafar. He wasn't there for the lava, the dismemberment, the full transformation into Vader. And okay, that's technically true. But let's do a quick audit of what R2 absolutely did witness. He was present for Anakin and Padme's secret relationship. He flew alongside Anakin in countless battles during the Clone Wars. He was on missions with both Anakin and Obi-Wan that involved highly classified Republic intelligence. He knew the twins existed, he knew where they came from, but sure, he missed the lava part. So apparently that's fine. The practical result of this decision is genuinely absurd. R2-D2 spends the entire original trilogy rolling around with Luke Skywalker, the secret son of Darth Vader, carrying a complete archive of prequel-era secrets in his head. Nobody ever thinks to ask. Nobody plugs him in and says, hey, what do you know about the Clone Wars? Luke never gets a heads up. Obi-Wan never pulls R2 aside. The most important intelligence asset in the rebellion is beeping away right there, and everyone just treats him like a fancy Swiss Army knife. Bail Organa ran a background check on one droid and gave the other a free pass because he missed one day of work. That's not a security protocol. That's a coin flip. but at least the droid's memory problems are accidental. The next plot hole involves a battle station that had every tactical advantage in the galaxy and still managed to fumble it. The Holdo maneuver. Let's talk about the single most visually stunning moment in the entire sequel trilogy. Admiral Holdo turns her cruiser around, punches it to light speed, and rips Snoke's flagship in half. The screen goes silent. Black silhouettes against a white shard of light. Every person in the theater held their breath. It is genuinely one of the most beautiful shots in Star Wars history, and it broke everything. Here's the problem. The second Holdo's ship tears through that mega-class Star Destroyer like tissue paper. Every single space battle in the franchise stops making sense. Every single one. Because if a hyperspace jump can be weaponized like that, then the tactical math of the entire galaxy changes overnight. Think about it. The Rebel Alliance spent years fighting a desperate guerrilla war against the Empire. Thousands of pilots died in trench runs, suicide missions, and last stands trying to take down capital ships and superweapons. The Death Star alone required stolen plans, a 1-in-a-million torpedo shot, and the literal force to destroy. But apparently, all they ever needed was one ship with a hyperdrive and someone willing to point it in the right direction. Why didn't anyone ram a cruiser into the second Death Star? Why didn't the Republic hyperspace ram the Separatist command ship at any point during the Clone Wars? Why didn't anyone do this literally ever in thousands of years of galactic warfare? You don't even need a crewed vessel. Strap a hyperdrive to an asteroid. Autopilot a freighter. The entire concept of a fleet becomes obsolete the moment this tactic exists. The filmmakers knew exactly what they were doing with the visual. Production reporting confirms the sequence was deliberately designed to shock audiences, and it worked. That moment landed like a thunderclap. But here's where it gets complicated. Shocking and internally consistent don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can surprise the audience without detonating a logic bomb that travels backwards through 6 previous films. And the worst part? The movie never addresses it. No character says that shouldn't have worked. No one explains why this is a one-time miracle. No official Lucasfilm policy statement has formally addressed the tactical implications for the broader universe. It just happens. It's gorgeous. And then everyone moves on, like the entire nature of space combat didn't just fundamentally change. The Holdo maneuver isn't a small continuity hiccup. It's a retroactive indictment of every military strategist in the galaxy for the last 10,000 years. But if you think one controversial tactical decision is bad, wait until you see what the Death Star does when it finally reaches the Rebel base. The Death Star's patience. Let me set the scene. The Empire has just demonstrated the most devastating weapon in galactic history, Alderaan. 2 billion people, gone in a single flash. The Death Star can delete a planet from existence in seconds, so it arrives at Yavin 4. The Rebel base is right there. Every leader, every pilot, every scrap of hope the rebellion has is sitting on that moon, and what does the Empire do? They wait. They orbit the gas giant Yavin, slowly rotating into firing position, while the rebels scramble X-Wings, brief their pilots, and launch a full assault on the station. That countdown clock on the tactical display might as well have been labeled, "Time we're giving the enemy to kill us." Here's the thing. The Death Star already proved it can obliterate an entire planet. Yavin 4 is a moon. The weapon that disintegrated Alderaan should treat this like target practice. But instead of firing immediately, the station needs a specific orbital position because the gas giant is in the way. That's the justification. The Death Star can't shoot through a planet. Fine. But that raises an even dumber question. Why did the Empire's navigation team drop out of hyperspace on the wrong side of the gas giant? You have a weapon that ends civilizations. You know exactly where the Rebel base is, Leia told them, and the battle plan is to arrive behind the largest obstacle in the system and slowly drift around it. This is the most powerful military in the galaxy. Thousands of Star Destroyers, legions of TIE fighters, a superweapon that makes planets stop existing. And their grand tactical approach to a stationary target is let's take the scenic route. Nobody suggested exiting hyperspace on the other side. For a clear shot, not one officer, not Tarkin, the supposed military genius, the man who authorized Alderaan's destruction partly as a flex couldn't check the approach vector. This isn't some minor tactical footnote. This single decision costs the Empire everything. Those extra minutes are exactly what the rebels needed. Without that window, Luke never makes the trench run. The torpedoes never reach the exhaust port. The Death Star never explodes. The entire original trilogy hinges on the Empire choosing the slowest possible route to a target they already had coordinates for. Even Lucasfilm knows this gets scrutinized. Pablo Hidalgo, a Lucasfilm Story Group member, has publicly engaged with lists of alleged Star Wars plot holes, picking apart which hold up and which are misunderstandings. But no direct official rebuttal to the Death Star's orbital patience has ever surfaced. Because what would they say? Grand Moff Tarkin preferred the view from the far side. It's a beautiful sequence, one of the most iconic in cinema. cinema. The tension, the music, Luke trusting the Force. It works perfectly as a movie, but as a military operation, this is the kind of decision that gets you court-martialed, assuming anyone survived to file the paperwork. But if the Death Star's patience cost the Empire a superweapon, wait until you hear about the plot hole that broke an entire trilogy's logic in a single scene. Palpatine somehow returned. Let's talk about the big one. The one that broke the internet, broke the fandom, and arguably broke the sequel trilogy itself. The Rise of Skywalker opens with a crawl that essentially says Palpatine is dead, and then immediately cuts to Palpatine speaking, alive, on a hidden Sith world called Exegol, commanding a fleet of Star Destroyers, each one equipped with its own planet-killing super laser. The Emperor, who was thrown down a reactor shaft, exploded, and then had the entire Death Star blow up around him, is just back. No build-up across the previous two films, no foreshadowing, just back. And look, I know this is the easy target. Somehow Palpatine returned has become a meme so overused, it's practically a greeting at this point. But here's the thing, there actually is an explanation, and it's more thought out than most people realize. The Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary lays out that a Sith cult called the Sith Eternal spent decades on Exegol, secretly constructing Palpatine's fleet, not weeks, not months, decades. Using a combination of occult Sith technology and conventional Imperial engineering, this cult was building an armada underneath the events of the entire original trilogy. While Luke was training with Yoda, while the Rebellion was blowing up Death Stars, while the Empire was collapsing, the Sith Eternal was quietly assembling the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. The plan was always in motion. Palpatine always had a contingency. And honestly, as an in-universe explanation, that's not terrible. It gives the fleet a defensible origin. It connects to established Sith lore about cheating death and transferring consciousness. It frames Palpatine as the ultimate long-game strategist, which is consistent with his character across 6 previous films. If you read the visual dictionary entry in isolation, you'd think, okay, that actually tracks. But then you pull back and look at the full picture, and the full picture is where everything falls apart. The Sith Eternal built an armada larger than anything the Empire ever fielded, in secret over decades, on a planet that requires a specific ancient Sith Wayfinder device to even navigate to, and nobody noticed. Not Imperial intelligence, not the Rebellion spy network that could steal Death Star plans, not the New Republic that governed the galaxy for 30 years after Endor. Not a single person in the entire galaxy stumbled across a fleet of planet-killing Star Destroyers being assembled in the unknown regions. That's the problem. The visual dictionary patches one hole and rips open 3 more, and the fleet isn't even the worst of it. The Rise of Skywalker gives its characters a 16-hour countdown to find Exegol and stop the fleet before it launches. 16 hours. To locate an ancient Wayfinder, navigate to a hidden Sith world, and destroy an entire armada. The entire plot of the movie runs on a ticking clock that feels completely arbitrary, because it is completely arbitrary. Nobody explains why 16 hours. Nobody explains why the fleet can't just launch immediately if it's been ready for decades. Then there's the battle itself. The Resistance arrives at Exegol, and the Final Order's shields are just lowered, without a fight, without a strategic reason. The shields on a fleet of planet-killing warships are simply down so the plot can happen. Resistance fighters charge across the hull of a Star Destroyer on horseback, actual horses, on the surface of a spaceship, in space, and somehow this works. Rey, meanwhile, performs ship repairs at a pace that would make a professional engineering crew weep. Navigation to Exegol requires an ancient Sith artifact, except when it doesn't, because eventually the entire Resistance fleet just kinda shows up anyway. Every solution in this movie exists because the script needs it to exist, not because the universe's rules allow it. Here's where it gets complicated though. No single official statement reconciles all of this. The visual dictionary handles the fleet. Novelizations fill in some character motivation gaps. But the cumulative weight of timing problems, operational impossibilities, and logical shortcuts in the trilogy's finale has never been addressed as a whole. Each individual issue has a defense. Together, they form something that no amount of supplementary material can fully explain away. And I think that's what makes this the #1 spot on this list. It's not just one plot hole, it's a cascade. Every patch creates a new leak. Every explanation demands its own explanation. The sequel trilogy attempted something genuinely ambitious. It tried to bring back the most iconic villain in cinema history, introduce an entirely new threat, and wrap up a 9-film saga all in one movie. That's a massive swing. But ambition and coherence turned out to be mutually exclusive, and the galaxy, far, far away, has never quite recovered. The Star Wars sequel trilogy delivered some of the saga's most visually stunning moments and some of its messiest continuity. Across 3 films and 3 different creative visions, long-established rules about hyperspace, the Force, and galactic warfare were bent, broken, and hastily patched over. Let's untangle exactly how it all fractured, starting with the single most controversial scene in modern Star Wars: the Holdo maneuver and hyperspace weaponization. It's one of the most visually stunning shots in the entire Star Wars saga. Vice Admiral Holdo aims the Raddus at the Supremacy, jumps to hyperspace, and splits the flagship in half in near total silence. The screen flashes black and white. The First Order fleet crumbles. It's breathtaking, and it completely breaks 40 years of galactic warfare. Here's the thing: if any ship with a hyperdrive can be turned into a planet-killing projectile, why has no one done this before? The Death Star trench run becomes the dumbest military strategy in history. Just aim an X-wing at light speed through the thermal exhaust port. Problem solved. The Rebel Alliance had entire fleets at Endor. One cruiser could have obliterated the second Death Star. Han Solo warned us in A New Hope that miscalculated hyperspace jumps would be catastrophic. Fly through a star, bounce too close to a supernova, trips over real quick. That line implies destructive collisions are possible, but across 6 Lucasfilms and the Clone Wars, nobody ever weaponizes it. Not once. Hyperspace is treated as a navigational challenge, not a tactical nuke. After the backlash, source books scrambled to patch the problem. They called it a 1 in a million shot. You need the exact mass, the exact hyperdrive configuration, the exact shield conditions, the exact trajectory, which is fine print, technically there, completely unsatisfying. Episode 9 even includes a throwaway line where someone suggests trying another Holdo maneuver and gets shut down because it's impractical. That's a meta-acknowledgement of fan complaints dressed up as dialogue. But the line doesn't solve anything. Holdo proved it works. The universe just decided to pretend it doesn't, but at least it's a one-off controversy, unlike what Poe Dameron does with hyperspace in the very next film. Hyperspace skipping and FTL. Travel limitation, let's be honest, the opening chase in Episode 9 is genuinely fun the first time you watch it. Poe is yanking the Falcon through rapid-fire micro-jumps, popping out inside an ice tunnel, nearly clipping a city, appearing next to some massive creature that has no business being that close to a hyperspace exit point. It's chaotic, it's loud, and it works as spectacle. But here's the thing. Rewind to 1977, and Han Solo gives us one of the most quoted lines in the franchise. Jumping to light speed without precise calculations means you could fly through a star or bounce too close to a supernova. That's not a suggestion, that's framed as a fundamental law of how faster-than-light travel works. Hyperspace skipping treats that same danger like a difficulty setting Poe just turned down to easy. And then there's the TIE fighters. In the original trilogy, standard TIEs don't have hyperdrives. That's the whole point. That's why jumping to light speed is the escape plan. The Falcon goes to hyperspace, the TIEs can't follow, end of chase. It's one of the most iconic tension mechanics in the series. But in this scene, First Order TIEs are matching Poe jump for jump with zero explanation. Nobody mentions it, nobody reacts to it. It just happens. Now, the novelization does try to patch this. It describes skipping as dangerously straining the Falcon's systems and being possible only because of its unique modifications. But none of that exists in the film. If you didn't read the supplementary material, you'd have no idea there were supposed to be limitations at all. And the connection between hyperspace tracking from Episode 8 and whatever the TIEs are doing here never explicitly linked across the 2 movies. One chase scene quietly retired decades of established tension, and the fix lives in a footnote. But if a few fighters bending the rules bothers you, wait until you see what an entire hidden armada does to galactic logic. The sudden return of Palpatine and the Scythe Eternal Fleet. Let's talk about the single most consequential villain reveal in the entire Skywalker saga. Not where it happened in the movie, where it happened in Fortnite. Palpatine's return, the thing that drives the entire plot of Episode 9, was announced via a limited time event in a battle royale game. If you weren't playing Fortnite on that specific day, you walked into the theater, read the dead, speak in the opening crawl, and just had to accept it. No build-up across 2 prior films. A Fortnite event, I don't know what to tell you. But the broadcast isn't even the real problem. The real problem is what Kylo finds on Exegol. Thousands of Ziston-class Star Destroyers, each armed with a planet-killing super laser. Not one super weapon. Thousands. Crewed by generations of Sith cultists building warships underground for decades. Here's where it gets complicated. If Palpatine had this fleet the entire time, why did the First Order build Starkiller Base? Why did Snoke never mention it? The strategic reality of Episodes 7 and Canon 8 completely falls apart the moment this fleet exists. The novelization does solid work, clarifying that the Palpatine on Exegol is a clone body, a decaying vessel inhabited by his transferred consciousness. This connects to Darth Plagueis' research, to everything he whispered to Anakin in that opera house. The Aftermath novels even mention Imperial remnants fleeing into the unknown regions. Those books are retroactively recruited as foreshadowing. The patch holds on how Palpatine survived. Where it completely breaks is what his survival means for Anakin Skywalker. 6 films build toward one moment. The Chosen One destroys the Sith. That's the prophecy. If Palpatine just transferred his consciousness into a clone, the second his original form hit that reactor shaft, then Anakin's sacrifice didn't destroy the Sith, it inconvenienced them. The films never explain how the prophecy still holds when the thing he destroyed simply refused to stay destroyed. But if you think a hidden fleet breaks the lore, wait until you hear what a single touch of the hand does to the entire metaphysics of the Force. Force healing and death reversal mechanics. Here's the thing about Force healing. It's not that it doesn't make sense as a concept, it's that it makes everything else stop making sense the moment it exists. In Episode 9, Rey heals a wounded serpent by transferring her own life energy into it. Later, she does the same to Kylo Ren after stabbing him through the chest. And in the climax, Ben Solo pours his entire life force into Rey's dead body, fully resurrecting her, and drops dead on the spot. Cool. Now rewind 50 years in universe. Anakin Skywalker's entire descent into darkness, his betrayal of the Jedi, his murder of children, all of it hinges on one belief, that the dark side is the only path to saving someone from death. If light side force healing existed as a learnable skill from ancient Jedi texts, which is exactly where Rey found it, then the entire tragedy of the prequels is built on an administrative oversight. Someone forgot to check the library, and Lucasfilm knew this was a problem. The Mandalorian episode, where Grogu heals Greef Karga's wound, aired days before Episode 9 hit theaters. That's transmedia priming. They wanted audiences already thinking, oh yeah, force healing is a thing now. Which is clever, but it also means an infant with zero training can do it. The film tries to cover itself with the dyad in the force concept. Rey and Ben share a bond so powerful, their combined energy is unprecedented. But the film never clarifies whether the dyad is why resurrection works or just why it works so well. Which is, not ideal when the answer determines whether every previous death in the franchise was preventable. The cost structure makes it worse. Healing a snake costs nothing. Healing a stab wound makes Rey tired. Resurrection costs a life. But where's the line? Nobody knows. And because nobody knows, every time a Jedi watches someone die going forward, the audience is silently asking why they didn't just try harder. But if you think retroactively breaking the prequels is bad, wait until you hear how they handled the guy pulling Kylo Ren's strings the entire time. The origin and identity shifts of Supreme Leader, Snoke. Snoke is the clearest proof that nobody planned this trilogy, and I don't mean that as vague criticism. You can trace it film by film, like watching 3 different people try to finish the same sentence. Episode 7 introduces Snoke as a deliberate mystery. No Sith title, no origin, no explanation for how this scarred, ancient-looking figure seized control of the First Order or corrupted Ben Solo. The fandom spent 2 years building theories. Darth Plagueis was the dominant one, because Snoke was powerful, old, scarred, and conveniently aligned with everything Palpatine described in that opera scene. It made too much sense, which should have been the first red flag. Episode 8 kills him, mid-film, cut in half by his own apprentice, and the movie couldn't care less about explaining who he was. Rian Johnson wanted to collapse the mystery box entirely and pivot toward Kylo Ren as the real antagonist. No more old masters pulling strings. Kylo did the thing, and now he's free. Genuinely bold storytelling. Then Episode 9 reveals Kylo was never free at all. Palpatine casually mentions he made Snoke, and the camera cuts to vats of deformed Snoke bodies floating in liquid on Exegol. Multiple copies, industrial scale. The sequel trilogy's central authority figure was grown in a jar like a novelty sea monkey, which is, not ideal. Episode 8's most celebrated moment, Kylo killing his master as radical self-determination, gets quietly revealed to have been a chess move by the actual old master all along. The subversion gets unsubverted. The cycle Rian Johnson broke never actually broke, and Snoke never once mentions Exegol, the Sith Eternal, or Palpatine across 2 entire films. Either that's the greatest puppet master concealment in fiction, or nobody had invented Exegol yet when those scripts were written. I don't know what to tell you. But if Snoke's identity crisis feels messy, wait until you see what they did to Rey's parents. 3 films, 3 completely different answers. Rey's parental lineage retcons. This is the one. The continuity break that launched 1,000 video essays and turned comment sections into philosophical battlegrounds. Because this isn't just a retcon. It's 2 directors having a public argument about what Star Wars means, and we gotta watch it happen across 2 consecutive films. Here's the setup. The Force Awakens frames Rey's parentage as the question of the new trilogy. The Force visions when she touches Luke's saber, the way Han looks at her, Maz telling her the belonging she seeks is ahead, not behind. This girl is somebody's kid, and the film wants you guessing whose. Then Episode 8 says, no. Kylo tells Rey her parents were filthy junk traders who sold her for drinking money. Nobody's. The film frames her tearful acceptance as liberation. You don't need a dynasty. The Force belongs to everyone. It's a genuine thematic statement, not just a plot twist. Then Episode 9 goes actually. She's Palpatine's granddaughter. Kylo clarifies her parents chose to be nobodies to hide her from Exegol, which technically preserves his earlier claim. But the technically not a lie defense is lawyerly storytelling that satisfies absolutely no one, because it completely guts the meaning of the original scene. Here's where it gets interesting though. The novelization explains Rey's father wasn't Palpatine's biological son. He was a Strandcast, a failed clone who developed his own identity and rejected his creator. Rey is essentially a third-generation product of dark side genetic engineering who chooses to call herself Skywalker. That's wild, but the deeper problem isn't lore. 6 films and decades of canon never once reference Palpatine having offspring or family of any kind. Inserting a secret lineage rewrites his character with 0 foreshadowing, and the competing visions aren't reconcilable because the contradiction is philosophical. Rian Johnson believes greatness can come from anywhere. J.J. Abrams believes mythic bloodlines are the engine of Star Wars. Both directed canonical films. Both are right. That's exactly why this one still stings. But if you think a disagreement about parentage is messy, wait until you see what happens to a single lightsaber across 3 films. The Skywalker's lightsaber and the restoration of the blade. Anakin's blue lightsaber gets cut from Luke's hand at Cloud City and falls into the infinite depths of a gas giant. The weapon is gone. It's tumbling into an abyss of crushing atmospheric pressure on a planet made of gas. There is no floor to land on. And then Episode 7 opens a chest in Maz Kanata's castle, and there it is. Han Solo asks the obvious question. Maz replies, a good question for another time. That time never comes. Not in Episode 8, not in Episode 9, not in a single piece of mainline media. Everyone just moved on, like it didn't happen. I don't know what to tell you, but here's where it gets worse. In Episode 8, the saber is destroyed. Rey and Kylo play tug of war with it through the Force. The Kyber crystal cracks, the hilt splits in 2. Luke literally threw the thing over his shoulder earlier in the film. The message is clear. The old relics don't matter anymore. Let them break. Then Episode 9 opens and Rey is holding it again. Repaired. A little metal band around the break point like a wedding ring on a fractured bone. No scene showing the repair, no dialogue acknowledging it. A weapon whose destruction was framed with enormous dramatic weight just quietly shows back up in working condition. And here's the sleeper issue nobody talks about. Luke's green lightsaber, the one he built himself, the weapon he used in his greatest battles, essentially doesn't exist in these films. It appears in flashbacks. That's it. The sequels center Anakin's blue blade as the saga's primary relic, while Luke's actual personal weapon collects dust in a narrative closet. The final insult is the burial. Rey buries the blue saber on Tatooine, a grand symbolic gesture for an object with more continuity gaps than any other prop in the franchise. Buried on a planet Luke wanted to escape his entire life. But it looks good on camera, and that's apparently what matters. If you think a single lightsaber caused continuity headaches, wait until you see what happens when you try to track an entire fleet across 3 films. The destruction and rebirth of the Resistance fleet. Let's do some quick math here. Episode 7 destroys the New Republic's government and most of its navy in a single Starkiller blast. Episode 8 then spends its entire runtime grinding the Resistance down to nothing. Ships run out of fuel, get picked off one by one, until everyone who's left fits inside the Millennium Falcon, a few dozen people. Then Leia sends out a distress call from Crate, a plea to every ally they've ever had. Nobody comes. 0 ships. The film makes this deliberate. The galaxy watched the Resistance die and collectively decided it wasn't their problem. So then Episode 9 opens and the Resistance has a jungle base, multiple ships, full fighter squadrons, and an active spy network inside the First Order, which is, a bit of a jump from literally everyone fits on one freighter. The film never explains how this recovery happened. It just happened. Between credits, the novel Resistance Reborn does bridge this gap. depicting Poe and Leia recruiting former New Republic members and rebuilding from scratch. It's a genuine effort to explain the logistics, but it exists exclusively for people who read a tie-in novel between theatrical releases. For everyone else, the Resistance regenerated off-screen like a starfish. But here's the real kicker. The climax of Episode 9 features Lando showing up over Exegol with thousands of ships. Thousands. Civilian freighters, capital ships, fighters from every corner of the galaxy, all mobilized on a few hours' notice to fight at a hidden planet most people didn't know existed until that afternoon. The same galaxy that heard Leia's distress call and said nothing now assembles the largest fleet in Star Wars history because Lando asked nicely over the radio. The moment works emotionally, but it costs the trilogy its internal logic, coordinating thousands of independent ships to navigate uncharted hyperspace routes to a Sith world nobody has coordinates for, all within hours. That's not a fleet, that's a miracle with no mechanical explanation. The political math doesn't add up when the previous film's entire thesis was that nobody cares enough to help. But if you think fleet logistics are a headache, wait until you hear about the backstory they invented for Poe Dameron between films. Poe Dameron's secret history and Spice Runner retcon. Before Episode 9, Poe Dameron had one of the cleanest backstories in the sequel era. Son of Rebel Alliance veterans Shara Bey and Kez Dameron, raised on Yavin 4, recruited straight out of the New Republic Defense Fleet by Leia Organa herself. A generational hero with a generational hero's resume. No gaps, no criminal detours, no awkward silences at dinner parties. Then Zori Bliss shows up on Kijimi and calls him a spice runner. Spice running, for those unfamiliar, is Star Wars shorthand for drug smuggling. The Kessel spice mines have been part of this universe since 1977. This isn't a gray area, and the film treats it like banter. Finn goes, "What?" Rey raises an eyebrow. Poe gets a little defensive. Everyone moves on. Cool. The Resistance commander used to traffic narcotics. That's also a thing that happened. Here's the thing. The established timeline of Poe's career left zero room for a criminal chapter. Comics, novels, reference guides, all of them tracked him from Yavin 4 to the New Republic Navy to Leia's doorstep without interruption. So Lucasfilm did what Lucasfilm does best in this era. They published a novel to fix it. Poe Dameron. Freefall reconfigures the spice running as a teenage rebellion arc. Restless kid, dead mother, overbearing father, falls in with Zori's crew, gets disillusioned by the harm, leaves. The entire criminal history gets compressed into late adolescence, so that the rest of his timeline still works. And technically it does work. The pieces fit if you hold them at the right angle. But let's be honest about what actually happened here. A screenwriter wanted Poe to have a Han Solo past because the original trilogy's hotshot pilot had a smuggler backstory, so this one needed one too. That's the creative logic. Not what does Poe's story require, but what did Han's story have? The spice running exists because of nostalgia math, not character necessity, and the moral weight of what spice running actually means in this universe, completely underdeveloped, both in the film and in Freefall. Nobody sits with it, nobody interrogates what Poe moving product actually did to people. It's set dressing for a roguish vibe. This is the most nakedly reactive piece of lore connectivity in the entire trilogy. A novel written specifically to plug a hole created by a single scene. 9 continuity breaks, 3 directors, 1 galaxy, and a story group working backwards from the credits to make the pieces fit. The Star Wars saga has 11 theatrical endings, and almost nobody realizes that the very first one secretly shows the villain winning. Every celebration, every medal ceremony, every triumphant finale hides something darker underneath that changes everything about what you just watched. That's why today, I'm breaking down every single Star Wars movie ending in chronological order and revealing what they actually mean for the galaxy, starting with the one that doomed everyone before the credits even rolled, The Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace ends with what looks like total victory. Naboo is liberated, the Gungans and humans unite, Anakin Skywalker is freed from slavery and accepted into the Jedi Order. The film concludes with a massive parade where Boss Nass raises the globe of peace while thousands celebrate. But here's where it gets dark. Qui-Gon Jinn is dead, and that death dooms the entire galaxy. Before you roll your eyes, hear me out. Dave Filoni has explained that Qui-Gon was exactly the father figure Anakin needed, someone who understood emotional attachment in ways the rigid Jedi Order never could. Instead, that burden falls to Obi-Wan Kenobi, a newly knighted Jedi fundamentally unprepared to raise a traumatized 9-year-old with attachment issues. The funeral scene shows Yoda and Mace Windu debating whether the Sith they killed was the master or apprentice, while Yoda voices grave concern about training Anakin. Nobody listens. And here's the kicker. Palpatine has been elected Supreme Chancellor. Chancellor. The true victory belongs to the Sith. John Williams literally encoded this into the music during the celebration parade. That triumphant song playing during the finale, Augie's Great Municipal Band, is actually a major key variation of the Emperor's theme from Return of the Jedi. The entire galaxy is celebrating their own enslavement, and they have zero idea. Behind the scenes, artist Ian McCaig revealed in 2024 that Lucas originally planned to have the name swapped. The older Jedi was Obi-Wan, who would die, with the younger Qui-Gon taking his master's name to honor him. Lucas changed this at the last minute. Even Liam Neeson himself criticized how his character died, calling it namby-pamby, and arguing a Jedi Master shouldn't fall for Maul's obvious fate. But if you think one tragic death poisoned the Jedi Order, wait until you see how the next movie ends while the Imperial March plays over Republic soldiers. Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones has what Screen Rant called the best ending in Star Wars history, and it's because George Lucas does something genius. He shows you exactly how the Republic falls while everyone celebrates winning the war. The ending unfolds in 4 scenes that get progressively more disturbing. First, Count Dooku delivers Death Star plans to Darth Sidious in a red-lit industrial hellscape. Second, the Jedi Council grimly discusses the war's beginning as Yoda delivers the line that defines everything. Victory, victory, you say? Master Obi-Wan, not victory. The shroud of the dark side has fallen. Begun the Clone War has. Third, senators watch thousands of clone troopers loading onto Star Destroyers while the Imperial March plays prominently for the first time in the prequels. That's not heroic music. That's Darth Vader's theme playing over the Republic military. The film closes with Anakin and Padme's secret wedding on Naboo. Anakin's mechanical hand, freshly lost to Dooku, clasps Padme's as Across the Stars swells. Williams deliberately composed this love theme in minor key, musically telling you this romance is doomed. This forbidden marriage creates the attachment Palpatine will exploit to turn Anakin. His fear of losing Padme becomes the lever for his fall. Here's the thing. This ending's genius lies in its structure of apparent victory masking total defeat. As one analysis noted, Episode 2 contains the true fall of the Republic rather than Revenge of the Sith. Palpatine now holds emergency powers, controls both sides of a war he manufactured, and has a clone army with Order 66 embedded in every soldier. The Jedi openly acknowledge their Force abilities are weakening, and then fatefully decide to hide this vulnerability from the Senate. Williams originally composed a remarkable end credits passage where Anakin's innocent theme from Episode 1 played on solo horn, then wove together the love theme and Imperial March. Lucas cut it. The dual nature of that musical choice, innocence corrupted by darkness, was apparently too on the nose. Meanwhile, Yoda's lightsaber duel was a last-minute Lucas addition. Stunt coordinator Nick Gillard confirmed the original plan featured only Anakin versus Dooku, but at least Anakin still has his limbs and sanity, unlike what happens when he sees Padme on Mustafar. Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith delivers the most devastating ending in Star Wars through masterful parallel editing that makes you watch a man die and be reborn in the same sequence. On Mustafar, Anakin Force chokes a pregnant Padme after she refuses to join his new empire, then duels Obi-Wan across volcanic hellscape in the legendary confrontation. The fight ends with Obi-Wan's famous line, "I have the high ground," followed by Anakin's limbs being severed and his body burning alive on black sand. Simultaneously, Yoda battles Emperor Palpatine in the Senate chamber before retreating into exile, realizing the Sith have won. The birth and death sequence is where Lucas breaks your heart. The editing crosscuts between Padme dying after naming twins Luke and Leia with her final words, "There is still good in him," and Vader being reconstructed in his iconic black armor. Their breathing synchronizes perfectly. As Padme exhales her last breath, Vader draws his first mechanical one. When Palpatine tells him Padme is dead, Vader releases the infamous "No" that became both iconic and widely mocked depending on who you ask. The final 3 scenes establish the original trilogy's starting positions. Vader and Tarkin observe Death Star construction in orbit. Bail Organa presents baby Leia to his wife on Alderaan. Obi-Wan delivers Luke to Owen and Beru Lars on Tatooine with a binary sunset shot directly mirroring A New Hope's most iconic image. The Force ghosts get seeded when Yoda tells Obi-Wan that Qui-Gon has learned to commune beyond death. Several alternate endings were filmed or seriously considered that would have changed everything. Stunt coordinator Nick Gillard revealed Obi-Wan was originally helpless in Anakin's Force grip before stealing his lightsaber for the killing blow. Another version had Anakin plead, "Please help me, Master," with his eyes turning Sith yellow only after Obi-Wan's rejection, making Obi-Wan complicit in his fall. But here's the darkest one. Concept artist Yane McKaig revealed Padme was supposed to arrive on Mustafar with a hidden knife, intending to kill Anakin to stop his evil. She can't do it because she loves him too much. This would have made her death dramatically earned rather than the controversial lost the will to live explanation that fans still mock. The medical droid literally says she's dying for no medical reason. That's the line. Hayden Christensen begged and pleaded with Lucas to wear the Vader suit himself rather than a stand-in, resulting in a custom costume. This made him the first actor to play both Anakin and suited Vader in the same film. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars, making it the best reviewed prequel. But if you think watching Anakin's fall is tragic, wait until you see the prequel-era movie where literally everyone dies, including the heroes. Solo. Solo's finale transforms what should be a simple heist resolution into a betrayal cascade that ends with one of the most shocking cameos in Star Wars history. The Kessel Run aftermath leads to a Mexican standoff on Savareen when Enfys Nest unmasks as a teenage rebel leader opposing Crimson Dawn and the Empire, foreshadowing the Rebel Alliance's formation. The heist culminates when mentor Tobias Beckett betrays Han to crime lord Dryden Voss, proving his earlier warning prophetic. "Assume everyone will betray you," Beckett told Han, "and you'll never be disappointed." After Kira kills Voss with his own ceremonial blade, Han pursues Beckett, who's taken Chewbacca hostage. In a Western-style showdown, directly referencing the infamous Han shot first debate, Han shoots his mentor mid-sentence before Beckett can finish talking. This establishes the defining character trait that made Han iconic in 1977. You don't give Han Solo the chance to draw second, but the true shock comes when Kira doesn't follow Han to the landing pad. She takes Voss's Crimson Dawn signet ring and contacts the Syndicate's secret leader via hologram. Darth Maul appears, played by Ray Park, returning from The Phantom Menace, and voiced by Sam Witwer from the Clone Wars animated series. With cybernetic legs replacing those Obi-Wan severed, Maul ignites his double-bladed lightsaber and instructs Kira to meet him on Dathomir. She flies off on Voss's yacht, abandoning Han forever. Her arc is genuinely tragic. She escaped one master only to serve another. The epilogue delivers the Falcon in the most Han Solo way possible. Han challenges Lando to one final sabacc game, this time catching his hidden card before the deal. Han wins the Millennium Falcon fair and square, echoing dialogue from The Empire Strikes Back. He and Chewie head for the Tatooine job, which is working for Jabba the Hutt and sets up the debt that kicks off A New Hope. Maul reveal divided audiences sharply. EC hardcore fans praised the connection to animated series canon and the revelation that Maul survived being bisected. Critics argued casual moviegoers would be completely confused about how someone cut in half could still be alive. The film became Star Wars' first box office bomb, earning $393 million against a $275 million plus budget, shelving planned sequels that would have resolved the Maul and Kira storyline. The production was infamously troubled. Directors Phil Lord and Chris Miller were fired after filming 80% of the movie. Ron Howard replaced them and reshot approximately 70% of the finished film. Actor Michael K. Williams, who originally played Dryden Voss, couldn't return for reshoots, leading to Paul Bettany's complete recasting. The Maul cameo was part of John Kasdan's original script, not a reshoot edition, meaning this twist was planned from the beginning. But if you think one shocking cameo divided fans, wait until you see the Star Wars movie where every single main character dies on screen. Rogue One. Rogue One's Battle of Scarif is the most emotionally devastating climax in Star Wars history because every main hero dies sacrificing themselves to transmit the Death Star plans. The extended assault interweaves ground combat with Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, K2SO, Chirrut Imwe, Baze Malbus, and Bodhi Rook infiltrating the Imperial Citadel, while space battles culminate in a Hammerhead corvette ramming 2 Star Destroyers into each other and watching them crash into the shield gate. The deaths create an unforgettable sequence that still destroys people emotionally. K2SO falls defending the vault entrance. His final goodbye, heartbreaking for a droid. Bodhi Rook successfully contacts the fleet to open communications, then accepts death when a grenade rolls into his shuttle. Chirrut Imwe walks through concentrated blaster fire chanting, "I am one with the Force is with me," to flip the master switch, killed by explosion immediately after succeeding. His companion Baze Malbus, converted back to faith in the Force by watching his friend die, repeats Chirrut's mantra while mowing down Death Troopers before dying himself. Director Krennic dies watching his own Death Star fire on him. Jyn and Cassian successfully transmit the plans but cannot escape. Wounded and unable to evacuate, they embrace on the beach as the Death Star's blast approaches using single reactor ignition, one of Star Wars' most haunting images. They die holding each other. father. Then comes the hallway. The Vader massacre sequence, added during reshoots and conceived by editor Jabez Olson, shows the Dark Lord systematically slaughtering rebels, desperately passing a data disk toward Princess Leia's ship. His red lightsaber ignites in total darkness. He force-pulls soldiers backward to their deaths. He pins one rebel to the ceiling while deflecting blaster bolts. The terror is palpable in every frame. The last soldier screams launch and passes the plans through the door before Vader reaches him. The Tantive 4 escapes. Princess Leia, digitally recreated via CGI using archive footage and Carrie Fisher's likeness, receives the plans. Asked what was transmitted, she delivers the final word, hope. This connects directly to A New Hope's opening scene minutes later and explains the fatal flaw in the Death Star. Galen Erso deliberately designed the thermal exhaust port vulnerability. Writer Gary Whitta's original drafts had Jyn and Cassian survive, but when filmmakers told Kathleen Kennedy they all need to die, she approved immediately. Tony Gilroy's reshoots restructured approximately 40% of the first act and third act. The Vader hallway scene achieved instant cultural phenomenon status, called the moment Star Wars fans had been waiting decades to see. Vader's true power on full display with zero mercy. Some criticism notes the CGI Leia hasn't aged well technologically, and the scene creates continuity tension with Leia's diplomatic mission claim in A New Hope after Vader clearly witnessed her ship's escape from the battle, but at least Rogue One's ending provides a clean connection to the next film, unlike the movie that ends with Luke destroying the Death Star and somehow Chewbacca not getting a medal. A New Hope. A New Hope's Battle of Yavin established the template every Star Wars ending would follow for the next 42 years. Desperate assault, heroic sacrifice, miraculous victory, and ceremonial celebration with swelling John Williams music. Luke Skywalker joins Red Squadron's trench run against the Death Star's thermal exhaust port as the station approaches Yavin 4 to destroy the Rebel base. Pilots fall one by one to TIE fighters and surface turbolaser fire. Darth Vader personally enters his TIE Advanced and locks onto Luke's X-Wing. Luke is seconds from death. Then Han Solo makes a surprise return in the Millennium Falcon, blasting Vader's wingman and sending Vader spinning into space. This moment proves Han's redemption from selfish smuggler to hero willing to risk his life for the rebellion. Obi-Wan's voice tells Luke to use the Force, prompting him to switch off his targeting computer and trust his instincts. Luke fires the shot that destroys the Death Star, killing Grand Moff Tarkin and thousands of Imperials in the explosion. The medal ceremony in the Great Temple concludes the film. Luke, Han, and Chewbacca walk down a long aisle between hundreds of rebel soldiers as Princess Leia awards Luke and Han medals, while John Williams' triumphant throne room fanfare swells. R2-D2 stands beside them, freshly repaired after taking damage during the battle. The entire rebellion celebrates their impossible victory against the Empire's ultimate weapon. Here's the thing. The ending resolved the immediate Death Star threat while leaving critical threads open for sequels. Vader survives, spinning into space after Han's attack. Luke demonstrated Force sensitivity, but remains completely untrained as a Jedi. The Empire persists with thousands of Star Destroyers and unlimited resources. This template victory celebration with emotional character moments and triumphant Williams music would define Star Wars conclusions for decades. One controversy persists to this day. Chewbacca received no medal on screen. Fans have debated this for 47 years. George Lucas later explained that medals don't really mean much to Wookiees, and though this feels like a retroactive justification, Chewbacca finally received one from Maz Kanata in The Rise of Skywalker in 2019, acknowledging the decades-long complaint. Behind the scenes, the ceremony was filmed at Shepperton Studios' massive Stage H, where extras reportedly mocked Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill during breaks, believing the film would fail spectacularly. The large assembly of rebels was achieved by repositioning the same extras across multiple shots to create crowd density. A deleted Tosche Station scene would have established Biggs Darklighter as Luke's childhood friend, making his death during the trench run emotionally impactful rather than just another pilot dying. Mark Hamill noted this loss motivated Luke's Force connection during the final shot, though audiences never understood that context. The scene was cut for pacing, leaving Biggs as a character Luke clearly knows, but audiences never met. But if you think destroying one Death Star creates a happy ending, wait until you see the movie that ends with Han frozen in carbonite and Luke learning Vader is his father. The Empire Strikes Back The Empire Strikes Back concludes with one of cinema's most celebrated downbeat endings, and it permanently changed what audiences would accept from blockbuster sequels. Han Solo is frozen in carbonite after his immortal exchange with Leia. "I love you," she says. "I know," Han replies, ad-libbed by Harrison Ford because he felt "I love you too" sounded ridiculous. Boba Fett takes Han's frozen body to collect Jabba the Hutt's bounty. Meanwhile, Luke confronts Vader in Cloud City's reactor shaft and loses his right hand in combat. Comes the revelation that reshaped everything. "No, I am your father," often misquoted as "Luke, I am your father," but that's not the actual line. Vader reveals Obi-Wan lied when he said Vader killed Luke's father. Luke is the son of Anakin Skywalker. Rather than join Vader to overthrow the Emperor, Luke chooses death and lets go, falling into Cloud City's central shaft. Luke survives by catching an antenna beneath the city, reaching out to Leia through the Force. Having switched sides after Vader altered their deal, pilots the Millennium Falcon to rescue Luke dangling from the antenna. R2-D2's last-minute hyperdrive repair allows their escape from Vader's Star Destroyer. The final scene shows the Rebel fleet gathered in uncertainty. Luke receives a mechanical prosthetic hand, matching his father's hidden injuries, as he and Leia watch Lando and Chewbacca depart in the Falcon to rescue Han. Williams's The Rebel Fleet theme masterfully balances hope and despair. The bittersweet Force theme plays, then the love theme reflecting hope for Han's rescue, then a parade of motifs concluding with triumphant fanfare that doesn't quite mask the darkness. The "I am your father" twist was kept extraordinarily secret during production. The script given to David Prowse, Vader's body performer, contained the placeholder line, "Obi-Wan killed your father." Only director Irvin Kershner, George Lucas, and Mark Hamill knew the real line. Hamill was told moments before filming. He recalled Kershner pulling him aside and saying, "I'm going to tell you something. I know it. George knows it. So if it leaks, we'll know it was you." James Earl Jones dubbed the real line later in post-production. Harrison Ford hadn't signed for a third film yet, so Han's carbonite freezing gave producers options if he refused to return. The 1997 special edition briefly added Luke screaming as he fell down the shaft using recycled audio of the Emperor's scream from Return of the Jedi. This was removed in the 2004 DVD release after overwhelmingly negative fan reception. The line ranks as the 11th most iconic film quote according to The Hollywood Reporter, endlessly parodied in Austin Powers, Toy Story 2, The Simpsons, and countless other media. Empire fundamentally changed blockbuster storytelling by proving audiences would accept dark, unresolved conclusions. Initial reviews were mixed, with critics expecting a happy ending like A New Hope. The film's reputation grew over time to be considered the best Star Wars film and one of cinema's greatest sequels. But if you think that's the darkest Empire could get, wait until you see how Return of the Jedi originally ended with Luke putting on Vader's mask and declaring he'll rule the universe. Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi intercuts 3 simultaneous battles for its climax that would define the original trilogy's moral core: space assault above Endor, ground assault on the shield generator, and Luke's confrontation with Vader and the Emperor aboard Death Star 2. The throne room sequence is where everything Lucas built across 6 years resolves. Luke duels Vader while the Emperor watches, goading him toward the dark side. When Vader threatens to turn Leia, revealed as Luke's twin sister during the film, Luke briefly taps into anger and severs Vader's mechanical hand. The Emperor urges him to kill his father and take Vader's place at his side. Luke looks at his own mechanical hand, then Vader's exposed mechanical hand, realizing he's becoming exactly what his father became. He throws away his lightsaber. "I am a Jedi, like my father before me." The Emperor attacks Luke with Force lightning, torturing him while Vader watches. Luke screams for his father's help as the lightning courses through his body. Watching his son's agony, Vader makes his choice. He lifts Palpatine and throws him down the reactor shaft. The Emperor's lightning damages Vader's life support systems fatally. Before dying, Vader asks Luke to remove his mask so he can see his son with his own eyes, not through technological filters. Father and son share reconciliation in Anakin's final moments. Anakin Skywalker dies redeemed. Meanwhile, Lando destroys the Death Star's reactor from inside the superstructure seconds before the entire station explodes. That evening on Endor, Luke cremates his father's body on a funeral pyre. During the Ewok celebration that follows, Luke sees the Force ghosts of Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin watching over him with approval. The ending has undergone significant revision across multiple releases, and fans still debate which version is correct. The original 1983 theatrical cut featured Ewok Celebration, known as Yub Nub, a celebratory song in Ewok language. The 1997 special edition replaced it with Victory Celebration, a more sweeping John Williams composition many fans consider a genuine improvement over the original. The 1997 version added galaxy-wide celebration scenes on Bespin, Tatooine, and Coruscant. The 2004 DVD added Naboo to connect the prequels. Most controversially, the 2004 DVD replaced Sebastian Shaw, who played unmasked Vader, with Hayden Christensen as Anakin's Force ghost. Critics argue it's disrespectful to Shaw's legacy and illogical, since Obi-Wan and Yoda appear as old men, not their younger selves. Defenders say it represents Anakin before his fall to the dark side, the last moment he was truly good. The debate continues 20 years later. The 2011 Blu-ray added Vader saying, "No, no," as he picks up the Emperor, widely criticized as undermining his powerful silent choice and echoing the mocked revenge of the Sith moment. Story meetings between Lucas and screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan reveal a much darker ending was seriously considered. Lucas wanted Luke to put on Vader's mask after his father's death and declare, "Now I am Vader. Now I will go and kill the fleet and rule the universe." Kasdan reportedly responded, "That's what I think should happen." Lucas rejected this because the film is for kids, though that reasoning seems bizarre given Empire's darkness. Additionally, Han Solo was originally going to die heroically during the Endor raid. Producer Gary Kurtz suggested this was rejected partly due to merchandising concerns. Vader's redemption through his son's unwavering faith remains one of cinema's great moments, completing the original trilogy's arc. But that completion would last exactly 32 years before Disney decided the saga needed to continue with a scavenger on Jakku. The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens concludes with cinema's most anticipated reunion after 32 years, and it's almost completely wordless. After Starkiller Base's destruction mirrors the Death Star's explosive end from A New Hope, R2-D2 awakens from years of dormancy and reveals the missing piece of the map to Luke Skywalker. Rey travels aboard the Millennium Falcon with Chewbacca to the oceanic planet Achto, location of the first Jedi Temple. The film's final minutes contain zero dialogue. Rey climbs a long stone staircase on a mysterious island, approaching ancient Jedi structures carved into rock. A hooded figure stands at the summit facing away. He turns to reveal an aged Luke Skywalker, embearded and weathered by exile. Rey extends Anakin's blue lightsaber, the weapon Luke lost when Vader severed his hand in Cloud City. They lock eyes, and credits roll before Luke speaks a single word. This ending mirrors A New Hope's quest to find Obi-Wan, positioning Luke as the Yoda figure holding all the remaining knowledge of the Force. Mark Hamill has less than 1 minute of screen time despite receiving top billing in the credits. The island, filmed at Skellig Michael in Ireland, evokes ancient mystical imagery that makes Luke feel unreachable and mythological. John Williams' score swells dramatically over purely visual storytelling, letting the moment breathe without dialogue. Here's where it gets complicated. The original ending would have shown Luke surrounded by floating boulders demonstrating his Force powers, but Rian Johnson requested J.J. Abrams remove this to fit The Last Jedi's story of Luke having cut himself off from the Force entirely. Hamill called both Abrams and Johnson separately to flag the continuity issue this would create. Johnson also requested swapping BB-8 for R2-D2 as Rey's companion climbing the steps, wanting the droid with history connecting to Luke rather than the new character. Audiences celebrated the cliffhanger while immediately debating Rey's identity and Luke's circumstances. Why did Luke abandon everyone? What happened to make him exile himself? Is Rey his daughter? The ending was praised for emotional impact and Mark Hamill's wordless performance, but criticized by some as leaving too many questions unanswered and echoing A New Hope's structure too closely with another Death Star-type superweapon destroyed. Hamill later described the sequel trilogy approach as a relay race, where the first guy runs the race and hands the torch off, suggesting frustration that Abrams set up mysteries without planning their resolutions. This would prove prophetic when The Last Jedi provided answers many fans rejected entirely. The Force Awakens earned over $2 billion worldwide, becoming the highest-grossing domestic film in history until Avatar retook the crown in 2021. The ending's cliffhanger drove massive speculation for 2 years about Rey's parentage, Luke's motivation, and Snoke's identity. Everyone had theories. Nobody predicted what Rian Johnson would actually do with these threads. But if you think 1 minute of Luke standing silently created controversy, wait until you see the ending where Luke dies as a Force ghost, and fans spent years demanding Lucasfilm remake the entire movie. The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi's crate climax features Luke Skywalker confronting Kylo Ren in what appears to be the ultimate showdown between Master and fallen student. Except Luke isn't really there. After surviving massive First Order artillery bombardment completely unscathed, looking exactly like he did 30 years ago, Luke engages Kylo in verbal sparring designed to buy the Resistance time to escape. When Kylo strikes with his lightsaber, the blade passes through Luke harmlessly. Luke vanishes. On Ahch-To, thousands of light years away, an exhausted Luke Skywalker collapses on his meditation stone. He's been force projecting across the galaxy the entire time, an ability requiring such immense power that it kills him. Luke gazes upon twin suns mirroring his A New Hope introduction 40 years earlier, smiles peacefully, and becomes one with the Force. Meanwhile, Rey uses the Force to lift massive boulders blocking the Resistance's escape from the crate base. The Resistance, now reduced to exactly one ship's worth of survivors fitting inside the Millennium Falcon, escapes. The film ends on Canto Bight, where a Force-sensitive stable boy holds his broom like a lightsaber, gazing at the stars wearing a Resistance ring. This broom boy scene indicates anyone can be a Force user regardless of lineage, directly challenging the Skywalker-centric saga's emphasis on bloodlines mattering above everything else. The ending proved massively divisive in ways Star Wars had never experienced. Critics praised it with 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience reception split so sharply that the film still generates heated debates 7 years later. Defenders called it bold, necessary evolution that challenged fan expectations and moved Star Wars forward thematically. Detractors were furious about Luke's characterization as someone who briefly considered killing his nephew Ben Solo in his sleep, Supreme Leader Snoke's anticlimactic death with zero backstory, Rey's parents being revealed as nobodies who sold her for drinking money, and the entire Canto Bight subplot existing. Mark Hamill's disagreement became the most publicly documented behind-the-scenes conflict in Star Wars history. He stated on record that he fundamentally disagreed with Rian Johnson's interpretation of Luke. "He's not my Luke Skywalker," Hamill said in interviews. "Jedis don't give up. If he made a mistake, he would try to right that wrong, so right there, we had a fundamental difference." Johnson responded that he couldn't treat Luke as a video game character who has achieved a permanent power-up, arguing heroes must face real struggles and potential failure. Hamill later clarified there was no feud, calling Johnson one of the most gifted directors he'd ever worked with, and admitted he should have kept his creative disagreements private, but the damage was done. Fans opposed to the film pointed to Hamill's comments as validation. Notable details reveal the projection twist early if you're watching carefully. Luke appears younger in his Force projection, hinting something is wrong. His footsteps don't leave red marks on Crate's salt surface like everyone else's. He wields Anakin's blue lightsaber that was literally destroyed by Rey and Kylo earlier in the film. All clues he wasn't physically present. The twin suns callback required visual effects, adding a second sun to Ahch-To's actual sky, which naturally only has one. But if you think Luke dying as a Force ghost created fan outrage, wait until you see the ending where Palpatine returns with zero explanation and Rey calls herself a Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker attempts to conclude 9 films and 42 years of storytelling on Exegol, the hidden Sith world nobody knew existed until this movie. Rey confronts her grandfather, Emperor Palpatine, somehow resurrected without explanation. The film literally has the line, "Somehow, Palpatine returned," delivered by Poe Dameron to explain decades of Sith eternal planning. When Palpatine drains the Force dyad energy from Rey and redeemed Ben Solo, restoring his body to full strength, Rey lies near death on the Senate chamber floor. She calls out, "Be with me," and hears voices of past Jedi. Anakin, Luke, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Mace Windu, Qui-Gon, Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus. Channeling their collective power, Rey rises with both Luke and Leia's lightsabers crossed, facing Palpatine's Force lightning. "I am all the Sith," Palpatine declares. "And I am all the Jedi," Rey responds, deflecting his lightning back at him. The Emperor disintegrates, his body unable to contain the power. Rey dies from the effort. Ben Solo, having climbed from the pit where Palpatine threw him, cradles her body. He transfers his life force to her completely. She revives, gasping. They share a kiss that launched 1,000 think pieces about whether it's romantic or familial. Ben smiles, then collapses, becoming one with the Force. His body vanishes immediately. The final scene brings Rey to Tatooine and the abandoned Lars homestead where Luke grew up. She buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers in the sand near the moisture farm, wrapping them in cloth. An old woman passing by asks her name. Rey hesitates, seeing Force ghosts of Luke and Leia smiling with approval. "Rey Skywalker," she replies, claiming the name of the family that showed her belonging. She ignites her new yellow lightsaber, a color associated with Jedi Temple guards, and watches the binary sunset that defined Star Wars 42 years earlier. The ending holds the lowest critic score of any Star Wars film at 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. Criticisms include Palpatine's return fundamentally undermining Anakin's sacrifice in Return of the Jedi, retconning Rey from nobody to Palpatine's granddaughter after The Last Jedi's themes about anyone being a hero, Rushed, pacing cramming too many plot threads into 142 minutes, Ben Solo's death echoing Vader's redemption too closely, and systematically undoing everything The Last Jedi established. The hashtag Bring Ben Solo Back campaign argued redemption shouldn't automatically equal death, pointing out Ben Solo was manipulated since birth. Defenses cite emotional callbacks to the entire saga, Adam Driver's compelling redemption performance, and Rey claiming the Skywalker name as thematically fitting since family is what you choose. But the division runs deep. Colin Trevorrow's abandoned Duel of the Fates script leaked online, revealing a drastically different film. No Palpatine resurrection, no Rey Palpatine reveal. Ben Solo dies unredeemed as Kylo Ren. Finn leads a stormtrooper rebellion inspired by his defection. Rose Tico has a significantly larger role. The final battle occurs on Coruscant, not Exegol. John Boyega praised leaked concept art as dope, suggesting he preferred Trevorrow's vision. Production was notoriously troubled. Trevorrow departed due to creative differences with Lucasfilm. J.J. Abrams returned with only 27 months for script development, filming, and post-production. The script was rewritten during filming multiple times. Carrie Fisher's death meant Leia's role used unused footage from The Force Awakens rather than new scenes, severely limiting story options. Editor Marianne Brandon stated they were still trying to figure out a lot of stuff with insufficient cutting room time to properly shape the film. And here's where the saga ends. 11 theatrical films. 11 completely different endings that reveal everything about how Star Wars changed across 42 years of filmmaking. The saga's pattern. Across 11 theatrical films spanning 42 years, Star Wars endings reveal a consistent philosophy that George Lucas embedded from the beginning. Apparent victories often mask deeper defeats. The Phantom Menace concludes with celebration, while Palpatine ascends to Chancellor. Attack of the Clones shows clone troopers deploying to the Imperial March. Revenge of the Sith intercuts Vader's birth with Padme's death. The prequels taught us that triumph can hide tragedy, but apparent defeats also preserve hope. Luke and Leia are hidden as twins while the galaxy falls to darkness. Han is frozen in carbonite, but Lando and Chewie immediately leave to rescue him. Luke dies projecting across the galaxy, but his sacrifice allows the Resistance to survive. Every dark ending plants seeds for eventual victory. John Williams' music consistently foreshadows truth that dialogue hides. The Emperor's theme woven into Naboo's parade in The Phantom Menace. The Imperial March accompanying clone trooper deployment in Attack of the Clones. Across the Stars composed in minor key during Anakin and Padme's wedding. The love theme in Empire's ending, suggesting hope despite Han's capture. Williams told the real story while characters celebrated false victories. The endings also reveal profound production tensions that shape the saga's creative direction. George Lucas rejected darker conclusions for merchandising and audience considerations. Lawrence Kasdan wanted Luke to become the villain in Return of the Jedi. Lucas said no because the film is for kids. Han Solo was supposed to die on Endor. Merchandising concerns allegedly saved him. Padme was supposed to arrive on Mustafar with a knife to kill Anakin but couldn't because she loved him. Lucas changed it to lost the will to live instead. The sequel trilogy's lack of unified vision created endings that actively contradict each other. The Force Awakens sets up Rey's mysterious parentage. The Last Jedi reveals she's nobody. Her parents sold her for drinking money, and that's the point. The Rise of Skywalker retcons this to make her Palpatine's granddaughter. J.J. Abrams shows Luke surrounded by floating boulders demonstrating Force mastery. Rian Johnson requests removal because his Luke has cut himself off from the Force. Mark Hamill calls both directors to flag the continuity problem. Nobody fixes it. Behind the scenes, conflicts shaped finales as much as creative intent. Mark Hamill's public disagreement with Rian Johnson over Luke's characterization. Colin Trevorrow's departure, and J.J. Abrams' return with 27 months to write and film The Rise of Skywalker. Rogue One's extensive reshoots adding the Vader hallway massacre, Solo losing 80% of its footage when Ron Howard replaced fired directors. Carrie Fisher's death forcing The Rise of Skywalker to use archived footage, limiting Leia's role severely. What emerges is a saga where endings matter, not just for immediate drama, but for what they reveal about cycles of hope and darkness, redemption and sacrifice. Anakin's journey from hopeful slave child through fiery fall to dying redemption in his son's arms spans 6 films and echoes forward through Ben Solo's similar arc. The Force ghosts watching over celebrations connect original and prequel trilogies while raising questions the sequels never fully answered. From Yub-Nub to Rey Skywalker, from twin suns on Tatooine to twin suns on Tatooine 42 years later, every finale reshapes what Star Wars means. George Lucas built a saga where the good guys win, but victory always costs something. The dark side is defeated, but never permanently. Hope survives, but only because heroes sacrifice everything to preserve it. That pattern holds across 11 films, 11 endings, and 4 decades of the most influential film franchise in history. Every Star Wars movie has one character who stands above the rest. One person, creature, or Sith Lord who could destroy everyone else on screen without breaking a sweat. Today I'm breaking down the single most powerful character in every Star Wars film and backing it up with actual feats, starting with the movie that invented the lightsaber, A New Hope. The first time audiences ever saw the Force used as a weapon was in 1977, and it wasn't subtle. Darth Vader walks onto a rebel ship, grabs Captain Antilles by the throat, and lifts him off the ground like he weighs nothing. No explanation, no build-up, just raw, terrifying power. And that was just the opening scene. But the moment that really cemented Vader as the most dangerous person in this movie happens at a conference table. Admiral Motti makes the mistake of mocking Vader's sad devotion to that ancient religion, and Vader starts choking him from across the room without moving a muscle. I find your lack of faith disturbing. That line is one of the most quoted in cinema history, and it works because Vader is literally proving his point while saying it. Now, some fans argue Grand Moff Tarkin is the real power. In A New Hope, he commands the Death Star, he gives Vader orders, and sure, Tarkin has political authority, but political authority doesn't mean anything when someone across the table can crush your windpipe with a thought. Tarkin pulls a trigger. Vader is the weapon. And then there's Obi-Wan. Your powers are weak, old man. That's not just a taunt. Vader backs it up with a single decisive strike that cuts Kenobi down. The greatest Jedi mentor in the galaxy gone. Vader doesn't struggle. He doesn't sweat. He just wins. But if Vader is this dominant in A New Hope, wait until you see what he does in Empire. The Phantom Menace. Darth Maul has maybe 15 lines in this entire movie, 15, and he's still the most terrifying thing in it. That's not an accident, that's pure efficient lethality doing all the talking. When The Phantom Menace dropped in 1999, nobody was ready for what Maul brought to the table. 2 Jedi walk into the reactor core on Naboo expecting a standard fight. Then Maul ignites the other end of his lightsaber, and the entire theater lost its mind. A double-bladed saber. Nobody had ever seen that before. And he didn't just carry it for show, he used it to simultaneously hold off 2 trained Jedi at once, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he made it look easy. Here's where it gets dark. Maul separates the 2 Jedi using the reactor's energy gates, isolates Qui-Gon, and kills him. One decisive strike. A Jedi Master. Dead on the floor. No monologue. No hesitation. Just execution. That's a massive power statement for a character who barely has a backstory in this film. He shows up, says almost nothing, and delivers the only lethal blow against a named Jedi Master in the entire movie. Now, could you argue Palpatine is the real power here? Sure, he's pulling every political string behind the scenes, but Sidious never steps onto a battlefield in this film. Maul does. Maul is the weapon, and the weapon works, but he's not invincible. Obi-Wan, fueled by rage and grief, bisects Maul and sends him tumbling down a reactor shaft, so Maul loses, but losing doesn't erase what he did. Nobody else in The Phantom Menace kills a Jedi Master on screen. Nobody else fights 2 Jedi simultaneously and wins half that battle. The silence, the double blade, the kill. That's enough. But if you think one Sith apprentice was dangerous, wait until you see what happens when an entire clone army enters the equation. Attack of the Clones. For 2 entire movies, Yoda was a little green guru sitting in a swamp telling people to be patient. He hobbled around with a cane, spoke in riddles, and gave off strong retired grandpa energy. Nobody, and I mean nobody, expected what happens in Attack of the Clones. Count Dooku is already terrifying in this movie. He's a former Jedi Master who defected to the dark side, trained by both Yoda and Palpatine, and he shows up wielding Force lightning like it's nothing. That's a big deal. Force lightning in the prequel era debuts through Dooku in this film. It's a weapon previously treated as the ultimate expression of Sith power, something that kills on contact, something you don't survive, and then Yoda just catches it. Barehanded, no lightsaber, no deflection tool, duel just his palms and the Force. Dooku fires lightning at him, and Yoda absorbs it, redirects it, and completely neutralizes what was supposed to be an unstoppable Sith weapon. The entire power hierarchy of the movie gets rewritten in about 10 seconds. Dooku goes from terrifying dark-side threat to guy who just realized he picked a fight with the wrong 900-year-old. Here's the thing, Dooku using lightning at all signals, he's operating at a genuine Sith level of power. This isn't some apprentice throwing sparks. This is a master-tier dark-side technique, and Yoda shuts it down with zero effort. That's not just impressive, it's a statement that tells you exactly where Yoda sits on the food chain. But if you think Yoda flexing on Dooku is the peak of prequel power, wait until you see what Palpatine pulls off in Revenge of the Sith. The Empire Strikes Back. Vader was already terrifying in A New Hope, but Empire Strikes Back is the movie that turned him into a legend, and it starts before he even says a word. The very first shot of Vader in this film is him standing on the bridge of a superstar destroyer. Not a regular star destroyer, a superstar destroyer. The thing dwarfs every ship the original film ever showed us. That's not an accident. The filmmakers deliberately opened with that visual because they wanted you to understand immediately that Vader's power has scaled up. He's not just a scary guy in a hallway anymore. He commands the most massive military asset the Empire has ever put on screen. But here's what really separates Empire from every other Star Wars film. The entire movie is structured as a contrast. On one side, you have Luke on Dagobah, quietly lifting rocks, failing to pull his X-Wing out of a swamp, slowly learning what the Force even is. On the other side, you have Vader actively hunting, commanding fleets, choking officers who disappoint him, and closing in on the heroes with zero hesitation. The film cuts back and forth between these two storylines on purpose. Luke is learning, Vader is doing, and that contrast makes Vader feel unstoppable, even in the scenes where he's just standing on a bridge giving orders. Then comes Cloud City, and this is where the evidence becomes undeniable. Luke walks into that duel thinking he's ready. He is not. Vader toys with him. There's no other way to describe it. The fight ends with Luke losing his hand, losing his lightsaber, and falling into a gas shaft. That's not a draw. That's not a close call. That is a complete and total defeat. Empire doesn't just tell you Vader is the most powerful character in the movie, it spends 2 hours proving it. But as dominant as Vader is here, the next film introduces someone who makes even him kneel. Return of the Jedi. For 2 whole movies, the Emperor is basically a hologram in a chair. He gives orders. He looms in the background, you know he's important, but you never actually see him do anything. Then Return of the Jedi happens, and Palpatine finally stands up, and he nearly kills the hero of the entire saga with his bare hands. The throne room sequence is Palpatine's one true showcase across the original trilogy, and it completely recontextualizes everything you thought you knew about him. He's not just a politician pulling strings. He's not just Vader's boss. He is a walking weapon of mass destruction who has been choosing not to get his hands dirty. The moment Luke refuses to turn, Palpatine delivers one of the coldest lines in Star Wars history. So be it, Jedi. No anger, no frustration, just calm, absolute certainty that he's about to end this kid's life. And then the lightning starts. Here's the thing people forget. Luke cannot stop it. He tries. He writhes on the floor, screaming, completely helpless against a sustained assault of Force lightning that Palpatine channels with zero physical effort. This isn't a fight, it's an execution in progress. But here's where it gets really terrifying. When Vader physically picks Palpatine up to throw him into the reactor shaft, Palpatine keeps channeling lightning. He's being lifted off the ground by a 7-foot cyborg, and his offensive force output doesn't even flinch. That detail alone tells you everything about the gap between these two, and that's the misconception worth addressing. People remember Vader throwing the Emperor down the shaft and walk away thinking Vader was stronger. He wasn't. Vader didn't overpower Palpatine, he restrained him. He made a physical sacrifice play while getting electrocuted in the process. Palpatine was winning that encounter right up until the moment he hit the bottom of that shaft. Vader's act was one of love, not superiority. The Emperor is the most dangerous person in that room, and it's not even close. But if you think Force lightning is impressive in the original trilogy, wait until the prequels show you the political machine behind the man. Rogue One. Rogue One is a weird one for this list, and I think that's exactly what makes it worth talking about. Every other Star Wars film has a clear answer. There's always one character who stands above everyone else through raw force ability, combat dominance, or sheer destructive power. Rogue One doesn't have that, and that's not a flaw. That's the entire point of the movie. This is the one Star Wars film where nobody has the Force. Nobody is swinging a lightsaber through the main story. There's no chosen one, no prophecy, no bloodline nonsense. It's a group of ordinary people, rebels with blasters and bad odds, who decide the mission matters more than survival. Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, Chirrut Imwe, Baze Malbus, Bodhi Rook, K2SO. None of them are individually the most powerful anything, but together, they pull off the single most important intelligence operation in the entire original trilogy timeline. Without them, the Death Star plans never reach the rebellion. Without them, Luke never gets his shot. The power in Rogue One is collective, and every single member of that team dies to make it happen. But let's be honest, if you're watching Rogue One and someone asks you what the most powerful moment is, you already know the answer. That hallway scene, Darth Vader shows up in the final minutes of this film and absolutely dismantles a corridor full of rebel soldiers. It's terrifying. He deflects blaster bolts, pins soldiers to the ceiling, rips a blaster out of someone's hands with the Force. It lasts maybe 90 seconds, and it's one of the most viscerally powerful displays of raw dominance in any Star Wars movie, period. Fans consistently rank it among the greatest Star Wars scenes ever put on film. So here's where I'll land. The heart of Rogue One's power belongs to the team, but the most powerful single character on screen, it's Vader, and it's not even close. He turns the final act of a war movie into a horror film, but Vader's hallway rampage is a warm-up compared to what happens in the next film on our list, where the Force goes to places nobody expected. Revenge of the Sith. Palpatine doesn't just win in Revenge of the Sith, he wins everything. Every single thing he's been building toward across 3 films pays off in this movie, and he does it with a combination of personal force power and political manipulation that nobody else in the entire saga can match. Let's start with the moment everyone argues about, the duel with Mace Windu. Palpatine unleashes Force lightning against one of the greatest swordsmen the Jedi Order has ever produced, and Windu deflects it back into his face. It literally melts him. His skin warps, his eyes go yellow, and he's left disfigured on the floor of his own office. And people love to say Mace Windu beat Palpatine. But here's the thing, Palpatine walked out of that room as Emperor of the Galaxy. Windu walked out of a window. The second Anakin steps in, Palpatine pivots from screaming victim to calm manipulator in a heartbeat. He loses the physical exchange and still wins the entire scene. That's not weakness. That's control on a level most characters in this franchise can't even comprehend. But the lightning duel isn't what makes him the pick here. Order 66 is one sentence, one calm, quiet command spoken into a hologram. Execute Order 66. And across the entire galaxy, simultaneously, thousands of clone troopers turn on their Jedi generals and gun them down. Temples fall, children die. Thousands of years of Jedi history erased in minutes. Not by an army, not by a super weapon, by a single sentence from one man who planned it all decades in advance. That is the most consequential single act of power in the entire Star Wars saga. Nothing else comes close. No lightsaber duel, no force ability, no Death Star firing sequence carries the same weight as one person ending an entire religious order with a phone call. And what makes it genuinely horrifying is how calm he is. There's no rage, no theatrics. He issues the order the same way you'd order lunch. That cold, methodical precision is scarier than any lightning bolt he could ever throw. Palpatine combines galaxy-scale political destruction with personal dark side mastery, and Revenge of the Sith is where both hit their peak at the same time. Nobody else in this movie is even in the conversation, but if you think political manipulation is terrifying, wait until we talk about raw, untrained Force powers showing up out of nowhere. The Force awakens. Rey shouldn't be able to do any of this. That's the point. She's a scavenger from Jakku. No training, no master, no ancient texts or hidden lineage revealed in this film. She's a nobody from nowhere, and within the span of a single movie, she pulls off 4 distinct Force feats that most Jedi need years of training to attempt. Let me break them down. First, the mind probe reversal. Kylo Ren straps her into an interrogation chair aboard his ship and tries to rip information out of her head using the Force. This is a guy who has been trained by Luke Skywalker and then further trained by Snoke. He's dangerous, he's killed people, and Rey doesn't just resist his probe. She flips it back on him, she reads his mind instead, pulling out his deepest fears. That's not beginner luck. That's raw Force sensitivity operating at a level that visibly shocks a trained darkside user. Second, she pulls off a Jedi mind trick on a stormtrooper. No instruction manual, no Obi-Wan whispering in her ear, she just does it. And honestly, it's one of the more fun moments in the movie because you can see her figuring it out in real time, failing once, then nailing it on the next attempt. attempt. Third, she calls the Skywalker lightsaber to her hand through the Force. And fourth, she defeats Kylo Ren in a lightsaber duel on Starkiller Base. A 19-year-old with zero formal combat training beats a trained Force user in single combat. Now, the Mary Sue debate, you've heard it. Here's the thing, though. Whether you love the storytelling or hate it, the on-screen record is the on-screen record. 4 measurable Force feats in one film with no training is a power statement. The movie shows it. The movie commits to it. And Kylo Ren, with all his lineage, all his training, and his cool mask, still loses to her anyway. But if you think Rey's raw power is impressive here, wait until you see what happens in The Last Jedi, because the Force gets even weirder. The Last Jedi. This is the one that's going to start arguments in the comments. And honestly, good, because The Last Jedi is the most divisive Star Wars film ever made, and even the question of who's most powerful in it doesn't have a clean answer. But that's what makes it interesting. Let me lay out the 2 candidates and you can fight about it below. First, there's Kylo Ren. Throughout the entire film, Kylo is the most active power presence on screen. He's volatile, he's dangerous, and he's unpredictable in a way that no other Star Wars villain really is. Most dark-side users are calculating. Palpatine plans everything 12 steps ahead. Vader is cold and methodical. Kylo Ren might kill his master in one scene and then reach out to Rey through the Force in the next. You literally never know what he's going to do, and that unpredictability makes him arguably the most dangerous person in the movie at any given moment. He's constantly using the Force, constantly in combat, and constantly driving the plot forward through sheer emotional chaos. But then there's Luke Skywalker. Luke spends most of this film as a broken, disillusioned exile who wants nothing to do with the Jedi, the Force, or the galaxy's problems. He's checked out, done, finished. And if you're measuring power by screen time or combat frequency, Kylo wins that conversation easily. But here's the thing. When Luke finally decides to act, he single-handedly changes the outcome of the entire film. His decision in the climax is the reason the Resistance survives. Period. One man, after an entire movie of refusing to engage, steps up and becomes the most important person in the galaxy for a few critical minutes. That's not just power. That's the kind of power that reshapes everything. And that's why I'm giving this one to Luke. Not because he throws the most punches or swings a saber the most, but because the entire emotional and narrative weight of The Last Jedi builds to his moment, and when it arrives, nobody else in the film comes close to matching its impact. Kylo Ren is the most consistently powerful presence throughout the runtime. Luke Skywalker is the most powerful person in the movie when it matters most. But if The Last Jedi's power debate feels complicated, wait until we get to Solo, where the most powerful character isn't even a Force user. Solo. Let's be honest for a second. Solo is not like the other films on this list. Nobody's throwing lightning, nobody's reading minds, nobody's lifting starships with the Force. This is a heist movie, a crime story, an origin tale about a kid from Corellia who talks his way into and out of every bad situation the galaxy throws at him. And that means most powerful here has to mean something different. The most powerful character in Solo is Han Solo himself, but not because of any supernatural ability or ancient bloodline. Han's power is pure resourcefulness, cunning, luck that borders on the supernatural, even though it absolutely isn't. Here's the thing. Every single major outcome in this film traces back to Han making a split-second decision that somehow works. He talks his way onto a crew he has no business joining. He pulls off the Kessel Run by flying directly into a gravity well that should have killed everyone on board. He outmaneuvers double crosses from people who have been running cons for decades longer than he's been alive. The guy improvises his way through an entire movie where everyone around him is more experienced, better connected, and more ruthless. And that's exactly why this pick makes sense. In a saga full of Force gods and galaxy-conquering Sith Lords, there's one film where the most dangerous person in the room is just a guy with fast reflexes and a big mouth. That's very on-brand for Han Solo. No midi-chlorians required, just pure audacity. But if you think personality and luck are enough to survive the Star Wars universe, wait until you see what raw, uncontrollable Force power looks like in the hands of someone who never asked for it. The Rise of Skywalker. Rey doesn't just use the Force in this movie, she puts on a clinic. Seriously, no character in any single Star Wars film demonstrates as many distinct Force abilities as Rey does in The Rise of Skywalker. And the wildest part? The most devastating one is an accident. Let me explain. Early in the film, Rey is locked in a tug-of-war with Kylo Ren over a First Order transport ship. She's pulling, he's pulling, and then something snaps inside her. Force lightning erupts from her hands, completely destroys the transport, and for one gut-wrenching moment, everyone in the theater thinks she just killed Chewbacca. That's not a controlled technique. That's not a calculated dark side move. It's raw, unfiltered power exploding out of her with zero intent and maximum destruction. One accidental burst takes out an entire ship. Think about that. Palpatine needed focus and fury to channel his lightning. Rey did it by losing control for half a second. And here's where it gets complicated. Force lightning is traditionally a Sith ability. It's the Emperor's signature move. So Rey, a Jedi, manifesting it feels wrong to a lot of fans. But whether it's good storytelling is a separate conversation from whether it happened on screen. It happened. The ship exploded. Chewbacca was presumed dead. The consequences were immediate and devastating. But that's just one ability out of at least 5 she demonstrates in this single film. She uses enhanced telekinesis throughout multiple sequences. She successfully performs a Jedi mind trick. She pulls off acrobatic combat feats that border on absurd, including slicing Kylo Ren's TIE fighter while doing a backflip. And then there's the genuinely new one that nobody had ever seen before in Star Wars, Force Bond Object Transfer. Rey physically passes a lightsaber to Ben Solo through their Force connection. Not a vision, not a telepathic message. An actual physical object moving between two people who aren't in the same location. That's not a stronger version of an existing power. That's an entirely new category of Force ability being invented on screen. 5 distinct Force powers in one film. Accidental lightning that destroys a ship. A brand new ability never demonstrated by any Force user in any previous movie. Whatever you think about the sequel trilogy, the raw feat count here is undeniable. Rey, in The Rise of Skywalker, is operating at a level of sheer versatility that almost nobody in the saga can match in a single film. But the real question isn't who's strongest in one movie, it's who stands above everyone else when you look at the entire saga together. The most powerful ever. So after going through every single Star Wars film, who's the most powerful character across the entire saga? And I know what you're thinking. It's Vader. It has to be Vader. He's the most iconic villain in movie history. He dominates 3 films, his Force abilities are terrifying, and his combat record is basically flawless. And honestly, that's a great answer. But it's the wrong one. Here's the thing. Political power alone doesn't make you the most powerful. Tarkin had political power, and he got blown up with his own weapon. Combat power alone doesn't do it either. Darth Maul was one of the deadliest fighters in the saga, and he got cut in half in his first movie. Raw Force ability alone isn't enough. Rey has some of the most insane Force feats we've ever seen on screen. Conjuring lightning, enhanced telekinesis, Force bond manipulation, but she has zero political influence across any of her films. There's only one character in all 11 movies who maxes out every single category simultaneously: Force ability, combat skill, and political influence. Emperor Palpatine. Let me lay it out. This is the man who manipulated an entire galactic democracy into handing him absolute power. He orchestrated Order 66, a single command that wiped out nearly every Jedi in the galaxy in minutes. He dissolved the Senate. He built not 1 but 2 Death Stars. He personally dueled Mace Windu using Force lightning in Episode 3. He tortured Luke Skywalker with sustained lightning in Episode 6. And even while Vader physically held him over that reactor shaft, he was still channeling enough dark side energy to fry both of them. That's a 10 out of 10 on Force ability, a 10 out of 10 on plot impact, and a 10 out of 10 on political influence. Nobody else in the entire saga touches that combination across all 3 dimensions. Now back to Vader, because he deserves a real answer, not a dismissal. Vader is the most consistently dangerous on-screen presence across 3 films. His Force chokes, his dueling record, his sheer physical intimidation, all legendary. But every single thing Vader does is in service of Palpatine's plan. Vader is the weapon. Palpatine is the hand that wields it. Vader's political power is entirely derivative. He commands because the Emperor lets him command. And yes, Palpatine lost. Twice. He got thrown down a reactor shaft, and he got obliterated by his own reflected lightning. But before those defeats, he reshaped the galaxy from a republic into a dictatorship, killed or corrupted most of the Jedi Order, turned the Chosen One into his personal enforcer for over 2 decades, and then came back and nearly destroyed the next generation of heroes too. That's the most powerful character in Star Wars, not because he won in the end, but because it took the combined effort of every hero across 3 trilogies just to stop him. Star Wars has over 25,000 years of history baked into its universe. From the very first Force-sensitive monks to the rise and fall of entire galactic civilizations, every era builds on the one before it. Today, I'm breaking down every single era in Star Wars canon and everything that makes them matter, starting with a period so ancient it makes the prequels look like yesterday's news. Dawn of the Jedi. 25,000 years before the Death Star, before the Empire, before the Republic, before lightsabers even existed. That's how far back this goes. The Dawn of the Jedi era sits at roughly 25,025 BBY, and it's the absolute starting point of everything we know in Star Wars. Here's the thing most people get wrong about the Jedi. They weren't founded as warriors. They weren't generals. The original Jedi Order was a spiritual philosophy, plain and simple. The Prime Jedi established the Order as a way to understand and protect life through the Force. Before that, a religious group called the Dai Bendu laid the philosophical groundwork. Think monks, not soldiers. The contrast between that and the armored generals leading clone armies in the prequels is honestly staggering. And here's a detail that will break your brain if you've watched Ahsoka or the Clone Wars. Huyang, that ancient architect droid who teaches younglings how to build their lightsabers, he was built during this era. That means he's literally older than the Jedi Order as we know it. He's been around for over 25,000 years, just casually helping kids build laser swords. But here's where it gets frustrating. Despite being the origin of literally everything in Star Wars, almost 0 canonical stories have been told in this era. It's one of the biggest blank spots in the entire franchise. Some fans find that maddening. Others think the mystery is exactly what makes it powerful. Either way, it's a foundation built almost entirely on silence. And that silence doesn't last forever, because the era that follows it. It's where the Sith are born, and everything starts falling apart. The Old Republic. This era spans roughly 20,000 years of galactic history. 20,000. And for most of that time, things were relatively stable. The core worlds formed alliances, the Republic took shape, and the Jedi Order grew into the dominant peacekeeping force in the galaxy. But about 15,000 years in, something fractured. A group of Force users broke away from the Jedi, embraced the dark side, and formed the Sith Order. From that moment on, the galaxy was locked in a cycle of war that repeated over and over again. Now here's the thing. Most of what we know about this era comes from Legends material. Games like Knights of the Old Republic, characters like Revan, entire wars and civilizations that fans spent decades falling in love with. None of it is technically canon anymore. Disney wiped the slate. But what is canon is arguably the most important figure in all of Star Wars history, Darth Bane. Bane is canon, the Rule of Two is canon. He appeared as a vision in the Clone Wars, confirmed as the Sith Lord who created the doctrine that would define the Order for 1,000 years. After centuries of the Sith throwing armies at the Jedi and losing, Bane realized the problem wasn't power, it was numbers. Too many Sith meant too much infighting, too much ego, too much weakness. So he destroyed the existing Sith Order and rebuilt it as exactly 2 people, 1 master, 1 apprentice. And the Jedi, they celebrated. They were so confident the Sith were extinct that they built their famous temple on Coruscant directly on top of an ancient Sith shrine, which tells you everything about how the next 1,000 years went. Because Bane's plan wasn't about winning a battle, it was about winning a war that would take a millennium to fight. 2 Sith hiding in the shadows, passing knowledge from master to apprentice, generation after generation, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Jedi had 0 idea any of it was happening, and the next era is where that false confidence starts to show cracks. The High Republic. After thousands of years of Sith wars, galaxy-wide devastation, and constant existential threats, the galaxy finally got to breathe. And honestly, it was beautiful. The High Republic era spans roughly 500 to 100 BBY, and it represents the absolute peak of everything the Jedi and the Republic ever built. The galaxy is thriving. The Jedi Order is at its most open, most diverse, and most connected to the Force it's ever been. And the Republic is actively pushing outward into the Outer Rim in what's called the Age of Exploration. This isn't a galaxy at war, this is a galaxy expanding, building, and genuinely trying to make things better. The crown jewel of this whole era was the Starlight Beacon, a massive space station launched in 232 BBY that served as a communications hub, a Jedi outpost, and a symbol of galactic hope, all rolled into one. Think of it as a lighthouse sitting at the edge of known civilization, broadcasting a message to every uncharted system. We're here. You're not alone. It's genuinely one of the most optimistic things Star Wars has ever created. But this is still Star Wars, so of course something tried to ruin it. Enter the Nihil, a chaotic gang of marauders who were less organized military and more space pirates on hallucinogens with hyperspace technology nobody understood. From 232 to 228 BBY, the Nihil waged a brutal campaign across the Outer Rim, eventually creating a blockade called the Storm Wall around a region known as the Occlusion Zone. They literally carved out a chunk of the galaxy and said, "This is ours now." Here's what makes this era truly unique though. It's the only major period in Star Wars that was deliberately built around optimism instead of conflict. Every other era is defined by its wars. The High Republic exists specifically to show you what the galaxy looked like when things were good, which makes everything that comes after hit so much harder. One more thing worth knowing. Almost everything in this era has been told through novels, comics, and audio dramas rather than films or major shows. That's kept it under the radar for casual fans, but the canonical consistency is rock solid. It's arguably the most carefully constructed era in modern Star Wars storytelling. And that golden age? It didn't last, because the next era shows exactly how 1,000 years of peace gets dismantled in just 13. Fall of the Jedi. 13 years. That's all it took to destroy everything the previous eras built. 1,000 years of peace, a galaxy-spanning democracy, an entire order of Force-wielding guardians, all of it gone in just over a decade. And the worst part? The whole thing was rigged from the start. The fall of the Jedi era spans from 32 to 19 BBY, and it moves at a pace that makes every other era look like it's standing still. It begins with the Separatist Crisis, where thousands of star systems started breaking away from the Republic under Count Dooku's leadership. Tensions escalated, diplomacy failed, and by 22 BBY, the first Battle of Geonosis kicked off the Clone Wars. 3 years of galaxy-wide industrial-scale warfare between the Republic's clone army and the Separatist droid forces. But here's the thing, none of it was real. Darth Sidious, also known as Chancellor Palpatine, was running both sides simultaneously. He was leading the Republic as its elected leader, while secretly funding and directing the Separatists through Dooku, who was his Sith apprentice. The entire Clone Wars was a staged con, the most elaborate political manipulation in galactic history, designed for one specific purpose: to force the Jedi out of their temples and into military command roles where they'd be exposed, exhausted, and surrounded by soldiers they trusted completely. Soldiers who had a hidden behavioral modification chip implanted in their brains at birth. In 19 BBY, Palpatine executed Order 66. Across the entire galaxy, clone troopers turned on their Jedi generals simultaneously. Thousands of Jedi were gunned down by the soldiers who had fought beside them for 3 years. Meanwhile, Anakin Skywalker, just 22 years old, pledged himself to the Sith, became Darth Vader, marched into the Jedi Temple, and killed younglings. That detail still lands like a gut punch every single time it comes up. Because it should. That same year, the Galactic Republic ceased to exist. In a single Senate session, Palpatine declared himself Emperor, and a democracy that had stood for roughly 1,000 years voted itself out of existence. Padme Amidala said it best, so this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. But the Empire wasn't just content with seizing power, it needed to make sure nobody could ever challenge it. Reign of the Empire. For 24 years, the galaxy lived under a boot, and that boot had a plan. When Palpatine reorganized the Republic into the Galactic Empire in 19 BBY, he didn't just change the name on the letterhead, he took the largest military apparatus the galaxy had ever assembled and turned it into something genuinely terrifying. Star Destroyers replaced diplomatic cruisers, stormtroopers replaced clone soldiers, and every single system in the galaxy got a very clear message: fall in line or get erased. But here's the thing, the Empire's real weapon was never the fleet. Grand Moff Tarkin codified the entire governing philosophy into something called the Doctrine of Terror. The idea was simple. You don't actually need to destroy every planet that resists you. You just need everyone to believe you will. Fear of overwhelming force is cheaper and more efficient than deploying it. The Death Star wasn't built to blow up planets. It was built so that nobody would ever dare resist in the first place. The fact that they used it on Alderaan wasn't the plan working, it was the plan failing. Meanwhile, the Great Jedi Purge was finishing what Order 66 started. The Jedi Order once had roughly 10,000 members spread across the galaxy. By the height of the Empire, you could count the known survivors on your hands. Yoda hiding in a swamp, Obi-Wan wasting away on Tatooine, a scattered handful of others running, hiding, trying not to get hunted down by Inquisitors. An entire civilization of peacekeepers, functionally extinct within a generation. But here's where it gets really interesting. Palpatine, the most paranoid man alive, was already planning for the Empire's failure while sitting on its throne. He secretly constructed an entire hidden fleet in the unknown regions called the Final Order. Thousands of Star Destroyers, each one equipped with planet-killing weaponry. A full contingency plan to build a new Sith Empire if the current one collapsed. Most people don't learn about this until the sequel era, but Palpatine was running a backup plan from day one. Imperial rule officially ended at the Battle of Jakku in 5 ABY, roughly a year after the Emperor died at Endor. And here's the wild part. That battle, the one that actually determined the outcome of the entire galactic civil war, doesn't appear in any of the films. The real end of the Empire happened completely off-screen, but the galaxy's problems were far from over. Because what replaced the Empire might have been even less prepared for what was coming. Age of Rebellion. This is it. This is the era. When most people close their eyes and think of Star Wars, they're thinking about these 4 years, not the Clone Wars, not the High Republic. This tiny window from 0 to 4 ABY contains virtually every iconic moment the franchise has ever produced, and it technically overlaps with the Imperial era we just covered. But it deserves its own spotlight because nothing else in this timeline carries the same weight. It starts with sacrifice. The Battle of Scarif, depicted in Rogue One, saw a volunteer strike team infiltrate an Imperial facility to steal the Death Star plans. Nearly every single member of that team died. Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, the entire Rogue One crew, gone. They never lived to see what their sacrifice made possible, but without them, there's no stolen blueprint, no thermal exhaust port weakness, no shot for Luke Skywalker to take. Everything that follows exists because of people who didn't survive to see it. But here's where it gets interesting. The Rebel Alliance as a formal unified organization, that didn't come together until 2 BBY. Mon Mothma issued the Declaration of Rebellion following the Gorman massacre, officially unifying the scattered rebel cells into one coordinated movement, which means the Alliance had only existed as a single entity for about 2 years before the Battle of Yavin. Luke Skywalker fired the most important shot in galactic history for an organization that was barely old enough to have its act together. 4 years after Yavin, everything ends. The Battle of Endor in 4 ABY killed Emperor Palpatine, redeemed Darth Vader, destroyed the second Death Star, and shattered the Empire's grip on the galaxy. 4 years, 2 Death Stars, 1 farm boy from Tatooine. The galaxy changed permanently. And here's the thing, this era isn't just living on nostalgia. Andor proved that there's still massive storytelling potential hiding inside this window. A spy thriller about the cost of revolution, set entirely within the Rebellion era, became one of the most critically acclaimed Star Wars projects ever made. Rogue One did the same thing years earlier. The original trilogy is the emotional foundation that every other Star Wars era is built on, and creators keep finding new stories worth telling inside it. But the Empire didn't just vanish after Endor. What came next was supposed to be a new golden age for the galaxy, and instead, it became a slow-motion disaster, the New Republic. This is the era that hurts the most. Not because of some epic betrayal or ancient evil, because the good guys won, and then they just let it slip away. The New Republic officially began in 5 ABY with the signing of the Galactic Concordance. The Empire was beaten. Their military was restricted. The galaxy finally had its democratic government back after decades of tyranny. For the first time since Palpatine dissolved the Senate, free worlds could govern themselves again, and for a while it worked. But here's where it gets complicated. The New Republic Senate split into 2 factions that absolutely despised each other. The populists wanted planetary independence, individual worlds making their own decisions. The centrists wanted strong central authority, a powerful government that could actually enforce galactic law. And neither side would budge, not an inch. The result was complete political deadlock. The Senate couldn't agree on anything meaningful, couldn't pass critical legislation, and couldn't respond to threats even when those threats were staring them directly in the face. Because while the Senate was busy arguing with itself, Imperial remnants had fled to the unknown regions and were quietly building a new military superpower called the First Order. And nobody in the Republic cared enough to stop it. Nobody except Leia Organa. Leia, the woman who helped destroy 2 Death Stars, who was instrumental in toppling the entire galactic empire, literally could not convince her own government that the First Order was dangerous. The Senate dismissed her warnings. They called her an alarmist. So, in approximately 29 ABY, she did the only thing she could. She founded the Resistance, a private military force funded outside official channels because the democratic government she'd spent her entire life fighting for refused to protect itself. Let that sink in. The hero of the rebellion had to build a second rebellion because the republic she created wouldn't listen. And then came 34 ABY Starkiller base fired. Hosnian Prime, the new republic's capital, was vaporized in seconds. The Senate, the fleet, the entire central government gone. 29 years of democracy erased in a single blast. Most casual fans don't fully register what that moment actually represents. That wasn't just a planet being destroyed, that was the complete annihilation of galactic governance. Every senator, every military commander, every institution that held the Republic together wiped from existence. The brutal irony is almost too perfect. They spent decades fighting for freedom. They bled for it. They watched friends die for it. They built their democracy, and then they watched it rot from the inside out through complacency and partisan gridlock. And before they could ever course correct, it was gone. 29 years. That's all they got. The Empire lasted 24. The New Republic barely outlived the thing it replaced. And unlike the Empire, which fell because people fought against it, the New Republic fell because nobody fought for it when it mattered. But if the Republic's collapse feels frustrating, wait until you see what rose from its ashes, because the First Order didn't just fill a power vacuum, they were designed to rise of the First Order. Here's where the Star Wars timeline starts feeling less like history and more like a conspiracy board with red string connecting everything. The First Order didn't just appear out of nowhere, it was built in layers, over years, right under the New Republic's nose. When the centrist faction in the Senate officially seceded in 28 ABY, that was just the public-facing move. Behind the scenes, these loyalists had already been retreating to the unknown regions, quietly building a war machine that would make the old empire jealous. They had fleets, they had stormtrooper programs, they had infrastructure, all hidden in uncharted space where nobody was looking. And the New Republic, they let it happen. The centrists maintained political influence inside the Senate the entire time, feeding intelligence back while their allies militarized in secret. Leia Organa saw it coming. She literally founded the Resistance because the Senate refused to act. Nobody listened. Then came the opening move. Starkiller Base, not a space station, a planet. An entire planet converted into a superweapon that drained a star to power its main cannon. And its first target was Hosnian Prime, the New Republic's capital. One shot. The entire system gone. The galactic government gone. The First Order wasn't hiding anymore, and there was almost nothing left to fight back. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. Supreme Leader Snoke, the guy supposedly running the entire First Order, the mastermind behind all of it, he was a puppet, literally. Snoke was a strandcast, a biologically engineered body grown in a lab and controlled remotely by Darth Sidious, Palpatine, the Emperor who everyone watched fall down a reactor shaft on the second Death Star. He faked his death, transferred his consciousness to a cloned body on Exegol, and spent the next 3 decades pulling strings from the shadows. Let that sink in for a second. Palpatine was simultaneously running the First Order through a sock puppet and building an entirely separate fleet called the Final Order on Exegol. 2 parallel Empire restoration schemes operating at the same time across decades. One was the public threat designed to conquer the galaxy through military force. The other was a hidden armada of planet-killing star destroyers waiting in reserve. If one failed, the other was ready. That's not just evil. That's project management on a galactic scale. The First Order conquered most of the known galaxy within a single year of revealing itself. 1 year. That either speaks to their overwhelming military power or to how catastrophically the New Republic had gutted its own defenses after the Galactic Concordance. Probably both. A government so afraid of becoming the next empire that it disarmed itself into extinction. But the real terrifying part isn't the First Order. It's that everything, Snoke, the fleet, the political infiltration, all of it was just one arm of a dead man's contingency plan, and the other arm was waiting on Exegol, ready to finish what the First Order started. New Jedi Order, 25,000 years, that's how long the story has been building. From the Prime Jedi meditating on a mosaic floor, to Darth Bane standing in the ashes of 1,000 dead Sith Lords and whispering, "Now there are 2, to a girl standing on a dead planet called Exegol, with the weight of every Jedi who ever lived flowing through her. This is where it all lands. In 35 ABY, the Battle of Exegol brought everything to a head. Darth Sidious, the final product of Bane's 1,000-year plan, revealed himself one last time. He had the Sith Eternal Fleet, he had a cult, he had literal lightning that could disable an entire armada. And Rey, a nobody who turned out to be his granddaughter, faced him anyway. She called on the voices of every Jedi before her: Obi-Wan, Anakin, Yoda, Mace Windu, Ahsoka, Kanan, all of them. And with that combined strength, she destroyed him. Not just Sidious the man, but the rule of two itself. The chain that started at Ruusan, that survived a millennium of hiding, that toppled the Republic and nearly consumed the galaxy twice over, gone. But it cost her everything. Rey died from the effort, and then Ben Solo, the man who had spent years as Kylo Ren terrorizing the galaxy, burning down everything his family built, made a choice. He used his remaining life force to bring her back. He saved the person he had tried to destroy, and then he vanished into the Force, the same way his mother had, the same way his uncle had. The Skywalker saga's central question was always whether someone who falls to the dark side can come back. Ben answered it. Across the galaxy, something else happened simultaneously. Ordinary people rose up, not Jedi, not senators, not generals. Regular citizens on worlds throughout the galaxy attacked First Order remnants, echoing the original rebellion in a way that felt completely deliberate. The message was clear. The fight was never about one family. It was about everyone. Then came the quiet moment. Rey traveled to Tatooine, to the Lars Moisture farm, where this entire saga started over 40 years ago in real-world time. She buried Anakin's lightsaber and Leia's lightsaber in the sand, a memorial to 3 generations of Skywalkers, on the planet where a slave boy once looked up at twin suns and dreamed of something bigger. A stranger asked her name, and she said Skywalker. That choice is arguably the most important beat in the entire era. Rey has zero biological connection to the Skywalker family. She's a Palpatine by blood, but she chose the name anyway because the Skywalker legacy was never about genetics. It was about what you stood for: hope over fear, light over dark, the choice to be better than where you came from. That's the thesis statement of the entire 9-film saga, delivered in a single word on a desert planet. Now, this era is deeply divisive. Fans argue about Rey's arc, Ben's sacrifice, whether the sequel trilogy earned its ending or stumbled into it. Those debates are real, and they're valid. But whatever you think about the execution, this is where the Skywalker saga officially closes. Bane's millennium of scheming, Palpatine's decades of manipulation, the Empire, the First Order, all of it finished. The Jedi begin again. Whether that's a satisfying ending or just the start of the next cycle is the question Star Wars will probably be asking for another 25,000 years. But for now, the twin suns set on Tatooine, and the story rests. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.